center field. Diving catch. Siani had the ball, pops away. A run is in. Adonis in at second. We're tied at 4. Did he complete the play? He's got the ball. It looks like a catch. Line drive into left field. That'll score 1. Here comes Herrera around third. He's going to score without a throw. And justice is served for Michael Siani. A 2-run single for the Cardinals here in the top of the 12.
You love seeing that. This guy almost made a ridiculous play to end the ball game. Well, he comes up in the clutch right here.
Probably some of the best catches I've ever seen, and that one might have topped them all to even get there. I don't know if there's many guys that do that, but yeah, obviously an emotional thing when you think you might have just saved the game, but to come up right there and get the hit, that was huge.
Big night last night for the Cardinals. Big night last night for Michael Siani with Alex Ferrario and Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Cardinals get a win 7-4 in 12 innings last night against the Milwaukee Brewers. Alex, it's a big one. They are now above 500 officially once again. But let's start with Michael Siani, who nearly made one of the best defensive plays that I've seen from the Cardinals this season, which is a high bar to clear because they've had a lot of good ones from both he and from Mason Wynn at shortstop. Didn't quite complete the catch. I think it should have counted just because of how incredible the effort was, but whatever. By the rules, it was not technically a catch. So we're going to go based on that. He also came up to the plate in the next half inning and got the job done with his bat. First, they expected him to bunt. He then ended up being able to get the line drive single in there for him, and they find a way to win the game, in large part due to what Michael Siani was able to do for them late. Alex, it sets up for what I think is probably going to be an interesting discussion. And this is something that's more big picture than it is like the micro, because honestly, I'm still, and we'll talk about this a little bit more here in a little bit, I don't know what this team is exactly and how I'm supposed to assess them in terms of like a day in, day out basis. Are we talking about the wins and losses? Is it more big picture? We'll get into that. But Michael Siani is a big picture conversation right now. He is somebody that could be a part of this team's long-term plans, or he could be for them what Richie Palacios was last year, which is a nice story, big-time development, and he becomes a trade chip that gets them something more meaningful. Alex, since May 1st at this point, he's batting .277. Now, he doesn't have a lot of pop. He doesn't get on base a ton, but he's got a high batting average, which for a 9-hole hitter with a gold glove type of defense that he's playing in center field, that is super valuable. And the Cardinals have told you with their actions and their words that right now they think he is a better player than Victor Scott. I think some are of the opinion that Siani is like this older, washed up, like on his end of his contract type of a player. No, dude, he's a year older than Victor Scott. These are two very young players with similar club control remaining. Alex, as you project forward here, and think about what Siani's future is here in St. Louis, what Scott's future is here in St. Louis. In your opinion, does this become a Scott versus Siani conversation? Can it be a Scott and conversation? How do you view their future roles for the Cardinals?
I think it's a Scott versus a Siani situation. Just from where the Cardinals are at in terms of, their prospect pool, where they see themselves in a couple of years in terms of competition-wise. I don't know if it makes sense for this team to carry two guys that profile as gold glove center fielders. And I know that sounds odd to say, but you've got your corner guys with Lars Nootbaar and Jordan Walker. That's the expectation beyond this season. You've got guys who can deploy out there if you need them to, Burleson or Donovan. I just don't know if it makes sense to have a guy sitting on the bench who doesn't really provide you a whole lot of offensive upside, although Michael Siani has been really good for you. What's that look like off of the bench? His sole purpose is to go in there as a defensive upgrade, specifically at center field, but you've already got a guy who's a gold glove caliber defender. So I think a lot of people would say, why not keep both of them? I think they're the same player. I think you're talking about the exact same player. One might have a higher ceiling in terms of home run potential, and that's Victor Scott. The other one, and this is bigger for me, the other one, Michael Siani, is at the major league level, and he is making plays that Victor Scott has to go work with Willie McGee to make. Like Michael Siani didn't have to sit on the bench for 2 months and talk with Willie McGee to figure out how to take the right step to a ball in center field. Michael Siani came to the majors this year, his first real taste of Major League Baseball, and he was making highlight reel plays like he did last night, and he's been doing it all season long. So I guess the question that you have to ask yourself as a Cardinals fan is what are you looking at? What are you going for upside? Because the upside of Victor Scott, maybe 15 home runs. That's what you probably hope. And, of course, you've got the speed. Michael Siani maybe get you 10 home runs, maybe get you 10 home runs.
Yeah,
you've got
like less than that, 5.
You've got the same speed, and you've got, in my opinion, better defense now. You got to ask yourself which one makes more sense.
So that's kind of where I'm at. I do think there's a higher ceiling to what Victor Scott is as a player. And the reason why is because of what you said with the power. You could potentially, it's all potential right now, have a 10 to 15 home run hitter in Victor Scott. And that just exponentially changes what you can expect out of your center fielder, especially when he has that kind of defense and that kind of speed. And I'm with you, Alex. I think his defense is like 2 notches below what Michael Siani is right now, today. But in the future, it could be pretty similar to what Michael Siani is defensively in center field. His base stealing could be similar or better than what Michael Siani is. And the power could be the thing that you look at and say, okay, we can dream on that, and it allows his ceiling to be significantly higher than what Michael Siani's ceiling is. I don't think there's any more pop in Siani's bat than what we've seen so far. Could be wrong on that. I would love to be wrong on that, but I don't think there is. So you're making a decision on, really, how can I project Victor Scott? How likely is it that he hits that ceiling in the major leagues? And this is something that the Cardinals are going to have to do going into the offseason, because I also agree with you that this is an or conversation. I do not think there is a reason to go into next year with both of them on your roster. I know many are making the case that you can have one in center, the other in left. Guys, you want to watch a team that doesn't score a lot of runs, because that's a really good way to do it.
Yep.
There's not enough power between the two of them, and the on-base percentage for the two of them, especially right now, is not high enough. Your corner outfielders, especially for this club, they've got to be able to hit. Yeah. And right now, you're not getting enough out of them offensively to do something like that.
If you do that with one of them in the corner outfielders, you're essentially saying Lars Nootbaar is not an everyday player for you, Jordan Walker's not an everyday player for you. And I'm sorry, there's more potential for those guys in terms of impacting your team offensively than worrying about making sure you're elite in one corner in a center field spot defensively. You've been great defensively this year, and look where it's gotten you. What's been your problem? Why are we not talking about the playoffs on September 4th? It's because this offense can't hit.
I think I would pick Siani, and here's why. I think Scott has more value in trades.
Yeah.
And that's a scary way to go about it, where you're essentially betting on the guy that has less prospect pedigree, and typically that's not a winning way to formulate a team. But think about this, Alex. If last year the Cardinals had made the decision of, you know what, we're building around Brendan Donovan as our second baseman of the future. He's our guy. We believe in him. We've seen him produce at the big league level. We're not going to fall in love with Trace. We're going to fall in love with production. And he's going to be our guy. And Nolan Gorman, we like what your potential is as a power bat from the left side. It's something that we believe that we need, but we're going to pay for that in free agency. We're going to go get somebody like a Jock Peterson that can be that left-handed power bat, and we're going to pay him $10 to $15 million a year to be that for us, because it's proven at the big league level. And what we're going to do with Gorman is we're going to send him somewhere else, to Chicago, and we're going to get that number one starter that we've been lacking with Dylan Cease. There is not that kind of value with Victor Scott. But could you get next year's version of Andrew Kittredge for him? I think so. Could you get maybe even a little bit more than that? Because Victor Scott had a lot more pedigree than what Richie Palacios had when you traded him last year.
Could you get another starter?
Probably. You could include Victor Scott maybe with an Ivan Herrera or something of that ilk, and get a pretty good starter in return, or get a really nice prospect in return, and just kind of start the process over and recycle it. So I'm not enjoying the fact that I'm saying, hey, the Cardinals could and probably should trade Victor Scott in this offseason, but this team's going to have some really difficult decisions to make. They have a surplus of position players right now in their core roster. That includes Nolan Gorman. That includes Victor Scott. That includes some of their first base options that they've got going into next year. And it's getting crunch time now for them to make the decisions on who do we keep, who do we build around, similar to what the Blues are going to have to do with their forward group eventually. And let's go forward with that group of players, and we'll find out if we were right or not. But we got to make some serious decisions here. And it's why, Alex, and this is a conversation for a different day, they need to say, or they need to decide this offseason who their future president of baseball operations is. Yeah. Whether that is in title of just making the switch this offseason, or announcing, hey, our succession plan is in place. This guy's going to be the one that makes decisions in the future, because you can't just punt this another year. Otherwise, you lose a lot of value in these players that we're talking about right now.
Yeah, It's time to do something different, and I think for the longest time it's been, let's keep all of these prospects in our arms so that we don't lose them, because we don't want what happened in the Marcelo Zuna trade to happen or the Randy Arozarena trade to happen. And I can understand the fear factor into that, but that's why, what BK just said, you need to make a regime change. You need to make somebody else making those decisions, because maybe somebody else can analyze the players that you have in-house better than what John Mozeliak has been able to accomplish. And you don't need to keep all of these guys. At some point, you have to look at your roster and say, we need to just fine point, permanently say, this is our center fielder of the future. And guess what? Michael Siani has been doing this from the start to finish. Offensively, he's been good for you. He's won you games. Defensively, he's been the best defensive center fielder in Major League Baseball this season. And I don't think anybody would question that after watching what he did last night. And look, Victor Scott, Michael Siani, Victor Scott, we're all there right now. Victor Scott is still a pipe dream. You're seeing some of it, but we've also seen the bad. Like, they did just pull Victor Scott out of the lineup and say Michael Siani's better because he still needs to work on his game. That means the Cardinals believe there's still more to work on. Michael Siani right now is probably what you're going to get. And right now, he's winning you baseball games. So I don't know which one, because, frankly, it does worry me about this Cardinals team that Victor Scott goes on to hit 20 home runs and steal 40 bases, and we're talking about what if again. I think the Cardinals have to make the decision, though, this offseason, because next year you can't do this again where we've got 6 guys that we're trying to figure out who they are.
I did ask this on Twitter. I'm at BK Sports Talk on Twitter. If the Cardinals decided this offseason that they would only keep one of their current center field options and trade the other, who would you keep, Siani or Scott? 75% of the more than 1,000 votes there, Alex, have said they would keep Victor Scott and trade Michael Siani. So what we're saying right now, hugely unpopular, at least with Cardinals fans on Twitter, in terms of who they would decide to keep. They would go with the guy that has the prospect pedigree. We would probably lean towards the one that's done more already at the big league level.
That's something the Cardinals never done in the past, gone with prospect pedigree over somebody who's done it at the major league level.
He's Alex. That is Grant. I'm BK. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. That is where you can go to find us over there. Alex, before we get out of here, Cardinals did get a win last night. We talked a lot of big picture, kind of future decisions to make in center field. The win is significant for them. They are now above 500, and they are still technically in the wild card race. They're 5.5 games back currently of the Atlanta Braves. They kept pace last night because the Braves also won. You're 1 game back of the Chicago Cubs. They lost last night. Alex, are you scoreboard watching? Are you doing any of that, or do you need to see a decent amount more before you get to that place?
Yeah, I'm not watching the scoreboard. I haven't checked the standings, honestly, since probably that Chicago Cubs series. I think this team needs to string together 5 or 6 wins for me to look at it and say, oh, okay, you're in this, because that's what the Mets have just done. I think they've won 6 consecutive games. Prior to the Cubs losing last night, they had won 6 in a row. Everyone else around you has already strung together 5, 6 victories to put themselves in this position, and you're still winning one, losing one, winning one, losing one. You put 5 together, I'll start to wonder what the standings look like.
I will say they're opening up my eyes, not because I think that they can do anything of meaning in the postseason. I do not believe that, but what they've done against these quality teams in this stretch of games has been really impressive. And that doesn't mean a lot, because they lost out on their chance against Cincinnati and Chicago and Pittsburgh when they came out of the break and lost those 3 series, and then they lost the head-to-head tiebreaker against New York. That was when you lost, in my opinion, your opportunity to be a real contender for the postseason. But the fact that they've been doing this against winning clubs, it's nothing to just completely write off. But ultimately, in the bigger picture, you're 1 game above 500, and you got to win. Like, I think until you're 5 games above 500, I'm not doing a whole lot of scoreboard watching personally. All right, coming up in 15 minutes, we're talking to David Pagnotta. He's one of the best NHL insiders in the business. He said something interesting that caught Alex's attention yesterday. Said the Blues were at least involved in potential trade negotiations earlier this offseason for a defenseman that we've talked a lot about in the past. He'll tell you who that is coming up at 11:30, but next, how would it change the future outlook for the Blues if this is the end of Torey Krug's career? He talked earlier today. Alex was there for it. He'll give you a vibe check on where we're at with Torey Krug and what this injury and the surgery that he's getting means for him, not just the short term, but the long term as well. We'll get into that next here on 101 ESPN. right, so earlier today, Alex Ferrario was out talking with Torey Krug and some of the other assembled media. Torey Krug made himself available for the first time since it was announced that he's going to be on LTIR for the entirety of the 2024 season. Alex, he has that pre-arthritic condition in his ankle. He explained earlier today he's getting a pretty serious surgery that is incredibly rare for any kind of professional athlete, but certainly athletes at his age. And so he explained earlier why he's deciding to get this surgery right now and kind of what the timeline was like to get to this decision. Here's Torey Krug with Alex Ferrario to other media earlier today.
Sitting down with my wife and my family, I never thought I'd have to get the surgery this soon. I felt good, leaving St. Louis last year, and I thought the things that I was doing, I'd be able to continue to progress and play hockey. And the following, few weeks after that, when I picked up my training, like I said, there were some red flags where I had to get on the phone and talk to the Blues and let them know what was going on. And that's just the disappointing part, because at the end of last year, I was fully prepared for another season in St. Louis and progressing my career.
Yeah, so a little backstory with this one, too. So the initial injury that happened to Torey Krug, he said, was in 2018 when he was with the Boston Bruins in the second round of the playoffs against Tampa. He said he went into the boards awkwardly after a shove from behind, and it kind of fractured that ankle, and they had to do surgery repair for it. And he was back the next season, obviously, because the next season was when the Blues and Bruins played against each other in the Stanley Cup final. And he said that he's had this every year since, and it's just been something that, it's arthritis, essentially, or pre-arthritis that you just kind of deal with, you navigate. And he said it's actually better when he gets into the boot and he skates, because there's so much support with the ice skate that he doesn't have to worry about it. But he said just gradually it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And he joked a couple of times that, his hope was that he'd get to 55 years old, because typically people that have pre-arthritis surgery are like 55, 65. And he said, I was hoping I'd be way into retirement by the time I'm worried about this. But he said off ice was the part that it just kept becoming more of an issue. And what he was trying to accomplish before they decided on the season-ending surgery was he was working on the bike. He was doing all of these extra exercises to rehab it. And he said at times it would feel well, but he said it always kept going back to things not feeling right for him, and away from the rink, it was really problematic. And I give Torey Krug a ton of credit, because he said he was in line and step with the Blues training staff and Doug Armstrong from start to finish. He was letting them know the moment things weren't right, how his rehab was going. And he said he did that because he wanted Doug Armstrong to have the ability to make other moves to better the team. And he was still hoping that he'd be good to go. But they finally came to the resolution that this isn't going to get any better until I have surgery.
So the next question, because we've talked a lot at this point about how this affects the Blues for 2024 and what the lineup could look like, because Torey Krug is not a part of it, what that means for the power play, what it means for their cap, what it meant for them to be able to go get Holloway and Broberg, all of that stuff we've discussed. What we haven't done a lot of is talking about how this affects the Blues for the next 3 seasons. Here's Torey Krug when asked about how this impacts his future as a hockey player beyond just this upcoming season.
We don't really know that, to be honest. It's just something that I got to take care of and kind of take it, day by day, week by week, month by month, and kind of go from there. Obviously, being out for the year, it's you can understand it's a pretty big, surgery that I have to get, and looking forward, I can't, forecast too much, but just got to stay in the moment.
Alex, what sense did you get from because this was a 15-minute conversation, that's like a 30-second clip from it. What sense did you get in talking with Torey Krug, reading between the lines a bit, on how he currently views his outlook as a hockey player over the next few seasons?
Yeah, the vibe that I had was, I don't know if Torey Krug believes he's going to play another game in the National Hockey League. We'll get to the emotional side in just a minute, but, after what Torey said there, JR asked him a follow-up and said, have you talked with the doctors about other athletes that have gone through something like this and, how they've come back from it? And he immediately bluntly said, no. He's like, I don't think there's any athlete that's gone through this and has come back from it. And then from there, he kind of got into how, look, I'm 33 years old, and you have this massive of a surgery and you don't know what the rehab looks like, the recovery looks like. This just isn't a broken ankle that you attach. It's pre-arthritis on top of a fractured ankle that he had that's taken years and years of damage. And just hearing him describe the emotions of not playing this season, being 33 years old, and when he made the statement that it's like, look, the doctors basically have said there's not a lot of athletes, if any, that have come back from this type of surgery. The vibe that I got was, I'm not sure if Torey Krug believes he's going to play another game in the National Hockey League.
It reminds me of the Alexander Steen situation.
Yeah.
In that,
very much so.
I remember when the Alexander Steen news first came out. I'm sure I was not alone in this. I'm just going to be totally upfront and honest about it. I was like, oh, they made up a fake injury for him. Like, that was my first thought, they made up a fake injury, kind of like you do with a baseball player, right?
Any Cardinals player, yeah.
Yeah, you're like, the pitcher, let's get an MRI because there's something that hurts him, and we'll find out, okay, there's some inflammation on his elbow or his shoulder or whatever. And this is a way for the Blues at the time to be able to circumvent the cap rules. Mm-hmm. We've seen this with Vegas. Like, we've all had our jokes about them. Like, teams do this. And so that was my initial thought. And then you hear Steen talk about how hard it was when he was going through all of the issues that he was dealing with at the final season of his career here in St. Louis. I was like, that was very much not fake. It was very real. It was something he was dealing with, and he could not go out there for another hockey season. And I think a lot of Blues fans had the same thoughts about Torey Krug. And they thought, okay, the Blues found something to be able to get out of this contract, to get out of jail free card. And after hearing Krug today, that is very clearly not what is going on.
Yeah.
This is a situation where Krug thought he was going to be able to essentially outrun the problem. He was going to be able to go into the offseason and train the way that he normally does, but by doing some of the off-ice things, like riding on the bike and keeping himself in shape by just skating a ton, he thought he was going to be able to get back onto the ice this year, and he couldn't do it. He just couldn't bring himself to train the way that he needs to be prepared for the season. And so I came away with the exact same takeaways you did, Alex.
Yeah.
I don't know that he's going to play again. Certainly here in St. Louis, and that's 3 years remaining on his contract, and we'll get into like the personal stuff here in a second, but for the Blues, what this means is like it really opens up a lot of flexibility for them, and I feel terribly for Torey Krug, but from a team-building perspective, man, one of the biggest questions that we had about the Blues for the next few seasons is, how are you going to move one of those contracts?
Yeah.
And the Blues essentially, by virtue of this awful injury and what he's dealing with on a personal basis, have found a way to potentially remove one of those contracts for the books. It requires them 2 years down the road to spend even above the cap, and that's a hard thing for an owner to rationalize sometimes, but it does allow for a lot more flexibility and potentially gets them out of this retool even quicker because of what is obviously an unfortunate injury.
Yeah, I mean, they got $21.5 million tied up in 4 defensemen beyond this season. And I mean, just put that into perspective to where 2 years ago we were talking about $32 million tied up into all of their defensemen. And this year you're at 30. Next year without Torey Krug, if he's not playing, which it doesn't sound like that's going to be an option, I mean, you're talking $21.5 million, and this is why I think it goes back to Doug when he was talking about the offer sheets of fear of retribution from another team. I mean, just going into next season with their forwards and defensemen under contract, they're at $62 million with a cap that's potentially at $93 million. And then add in the goaltenders. I mean, you're talking still below $70 million with 20-something million dollars of cap space to work. And this is a terrible thing for Torey Krug, but if you look at the team structure, that was why they acquired Philip Broberg, because, well, Philip Broberg might be a top 4 defenseman. You hope that Lindstein develops into a top 4 defenseman. And then, like most teams do, when you're exiting out of a retool, if you've got the assets and the equity to go out there and make a big-time trade to better your team, that's how you get out of the retool faster.
All right, last thing on this. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. I'm reading this text because I think this next quote we're about to play from Torey Krug is going to make this person change their mind on it. It's 100% Krug knowing he was leaving St. Louis one way or another and him going ahead with the surgery to keep it from happening. There was once upon a time that I would have absolutely believed that. Like,
when we initially got the news, I initially believed that when we initially got the news.
From what we have now learned about this surgery, you don't get this surgery unless you absolutely need it. Like, it is a invasive surgery. He's getting screws placed into his ankle. like he's fusing bones together. This is like getting back surgery. Like you don't get it unless it's your absolute last resort. He tried everything else. Now he decided, I've got to do this surgery.
And what Torey Krug said was, they don't even know if this will solve the problem.
Correct.
This is just the steps to avoid, to stop doing what he's been doing.
So the final thing that I want to play on this is Torey Krug. I've edited this down a bit just for time's sake, because it's like 2.5 minutes with some empty pauses in here. Torey Krug was asked earlier today, and this was the one time that he really truly got emotional, about how this impacts his life away from the ice. And Alex, I know this hit home for you. As I was listening to it earlier today, it certainly hit home for me as well. Take a listen to this, and let me know if you think Torey Krug's just doing this for the hell of it.
How much did the injury kind of affect your day-to-day life away from the sport?
Yeah, that's like I just said. You know, I'm gonna feel better as a person, and I'm gonna be able to carry my kids up and down the stairs, which I haven't been. I'm able to do it some days, but waking up, it's tough. So.
Timetable for when you plan to have this done?
Next couple weeks.
You're going to catch yourself around the rink still? I mean, as often as you can, maybe even, I don't know, in sort of a sense, kind of coaching the guys along.
Sorry.
No, that's understandable.
I think that's, it's a big part of, like, the people that are around you. And like I said, the Blues have been amazing. My teammates have been great, so I'll be around for sure. That's what I've known and loved for so long, so.
This story is a lot of things, right? It's about the Blues, what their immediate future is, what their long-term future is, how they're going to be able to work things up with the cap, how they fix their blue line. It encapsulates so many different things that we've talked about with the Blues for the last 5 years. It's also about a person who right now is dealing with like a significant injury, and on a human level, if we're just purely looking at this from a human level, that sucks, dude. Yeah. And it broke my heart to listen to it earlier today as a relatively new father, hearing him talk about like, hey, some days I can and some days I can't pick my kids up. Yeah. It breaks you inside. So I feel for the guy. It sucks. We will talk about this as a hockey story most of the time from here on out. But dude, listening to him earlier today, I couldn't help but just like my heart broke for the guy just on a purely human level.
Yeah. I mean, real quick, because I know we got to get to David Pagnotta here, but I got choked up when he started crying because hearing him say that like there are some days where he can't pick up his kid. I mean, like that is the worst thing to hear. And I mean, he said that the impact that it's had is more on him off of the ice and with his family than has been on the ice. And think of it, this guy didn't get drafted. He was an undrafted signee and has played since 2013 in the National Hockey League. The toll that his body has taken, and now he doesn't potentially get to play again at 33 years old, and his life away from hockey is impacted of how he gets to be with his family. However you feel about Torey Krug is one thing, but man, when it gets personal like that, when you're talking about like your family and your kids, I mean, that broke me.
That is the human side of things. We're going to talk about the hockey side of things, how it affects the Blues, what the Blues do next, and what the Blues were potentially interested in this offseason with David Pagnotta of the Fourth Period next year on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals found a way to win last night, 7-4 the final in 12 innings as they beat the Brewers in Game 2 of that series. Steven Matz, coming off the IL, went 4 2/3 innings, had 3 hits allowed, 3 earned runs against, and 7 strikeouts in the performance. Today, the Cardinals will hope to win the series against the Brewers as they close that series out, and Sonny Gray will be on the mound for the Cardinals, going up against Colin Ray for the Brewers, and first pitch will be at 6:40. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley, and we're happy to go out to the 101 ESPN hotline to be joined by David Pagnotta. He's the editor-in-chief of The Fourth Period. He's also a host and analyst for Sirius XM's NHL channel. He joins us from time to time here on BK and Ferrario. David, we appreciate the time as always, man. Alex saw a report the other day that you had said something that caught his attention. You said that the Blues were interested in at least one defenseman on the market via trade earlier this offseason. That didn't end up coming to fruition. Can you give us a little bit of insight into what the Blues were exploring at the time and kind of how it led us to where we are today?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me again, guys. Great to be back on. Look, the Blues, were exploring a number of different options under decor this offseason. Now, things shifted. They end up with Philip Broberg. I think he's going to do well with the club. But before that, they were exploring their different options. There was, they weren't getting a full sense on the overall scope of the health of Torey Krug. They were exploring potentially moving him in a move in order to free up cap space. Obviously, that didn't happen. But they were looking around to see how they could find ways to improve their defensive core. And Mackenzie Weegar of the Calgary Flames was a player that they had spoken about. They spoke to Calgary about. They had discussions about. My understanding is things escalated around the draft, and then shortly after kind of fizzled out when they couldn't really come to terms. Now, also Weegar has a full no trade clause, so he would have had to approve a deal. But I don't think they got to that point. I don't get the sense they got that close to it yet. But they definitely had discussions with Calgary about the potential of adding Weegar to the back end. 7 years on his deal, including a season, $6.25 million. Calgary's willing to listen. It would take a significant type of move. They're willing to listen on it, but again, didn't really come to fruition with the Blues in June.
David, I think the part that most intrigued me about this report that I saw was, of course, the Blues were able to acquire Philip Broberg, and seemingly you would say that, well, that kind of killed any of that momentum that they were going after Mackenzie Weegar. But Doug Armstrong made it pretty clear that, this has kind of been in the works for some time in terms of watching Philip Broberg, seeing what the Edmonton Oilers were going to do. Yep. Does Mackenzie Weegar feel like it's a dead thing with the Blues now that Philip Broberg is there, now that they fill that defensive spot?
I don't think so. I don't think it's going to eliminate that possibility in terms of them re-exploring this opportunity down the road. I don't think it's one right now for a variety of different reasons. I think again, there's some cap implications for St. Louis. Now they do have a little bit of, or can implement some flexibility if they put Krug on LTIR when they need to later on in the season. They don't have to do that now. But it's certainly something that they could re-examine, whether it's Doug Armstrong leading that discussion, Alex Steen leading that discussion. It's certainly something that they can explore down the road. Again, as I mentioned, Calgary is kind of open for business from the sounds of things. They haven't dove headfirst into declaring a rebuild. They've acknowledged that they're going to have to make some adjustments and start to go through that process. But they are willing to listen on a number of players. Another defenseman on their club, Rasmus Andersson, is a player they are willing to listen on and move. He's got 1 year left on his contract after this season, so there's still some controllability there. Up front, Nazem Kadri, they're willing to listen on him. They explored that around the draft as well. He's got a full no move. I think he's willing to explore options outside of Calgary, but they got to get to obviously to that point, and some others. So Calgary's open for business. So the Blues want to re-examine this possibility, reopen those discussions with Craig Conroy, Calgary's GM, about Mackenzie Weegar. There's still, I guess, an open door from Calgary's perspective to take those calls.
Last question that I've got for David Pagnotta. He's joining us via the 101 ESPN hotline. You can hear him on Sirius XM's NHL channel. You can read him over at the fourth period. David, the Blues have had a busy offseason, to put it mildly. They added Suter. They added Broberg. They added Holloway. They added Fox, Texier, Joseph. There's a lot of new additions into their lineup here in St. Louis. I'm curious, you have more of a 10,000-foot view national perspective on this. How do you view the Blues within the Western Conference going into this season?
Well, look, this team, and talking to some of their players over parts of the summer, there's a lot of confidence within this group. Not just because of making certain additions to the club and having some guys fully healthy to start the campaign. Some guys are due for a bit of a rebound type of campaign, a rebound type of year. So to see some of those players get to that point this season, I certainly wouldn't be surprised, whatsoever. I do anticipate this team, obviously competing for a playoff spot and making a little bit of noise in the Central. A lot of it, again, will depend on the performance of some of their top guys, Jordan Binnington in net, Rob Thomas and Jordan Kyrou in the in the season, and providing offense from that perspective, the D-core being sound as well. There's a lot of potential within this group to make a little bit of noise this year, and then obviously we all know you get to the playoffs, anything can happen. But there is a lot of confidence within this group, and seeing some of these guys perform. Jordan Kyrou here in Toronto, he actually came to our golf tournament at the end of July. He's had a good mentality so far this summer. And he's, rearing to go for the new season. So I'm expecting this club to make some noise this year.
He's David Pagnotta. Find his work over at the fourth period. Hear him on Sirius XM's NHL channel. David, thanks so much for the time as always, man. We appreciate it. We'll talk with you again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, David.
It's David Pagnotta joining us here on 101 ESPN. Appreciate his time as always. Alex, we wanted to reach out to kind of get the full details of that report that he had on the Mackenzie Weegar situation. Now, I'm not expecting the Blues to do anything with Weegar at this point, or really probably even not even this season. But sometimes you'll hear about, like, the Nolan Arenado trade is one that immediately comes to mind for me.
You're thinking the same thing I am.
The Cardinals had talked to the Rockies about Nolan Arenado for like 3 years. He was always a player that they were interested in. And so when you see reports like this, I always kind of file it into the back of my memory to say, okay, that is somebody that maybe as we circle back next offseason into the Blues, say, okay, Suter's no longer here. We need somebody to take that spot in our lineup. Who could we go out there and acquire, as there is now potentially more flexibility with that money from Torey Krug long-term? Weegar's a name that I would just keep in the back of your mind. And if this retool goes quicker than expected, if they get some positive returns on the forwards, now you could look at the blue line and be like, all right, Mackenzie Weegar, not an old player, but also not as young as some of the core group of guys that they've been trying to add over the last few years. If they decide that's the missing piece that they can go out there and acquire next offseason to really accelerate this thing, he's somebody that makes a lot of sense for them, and he's also not going to cost you an arm and a leg, both via trade. I don't think it's going to cost some crazy amount for him, or money. He's like $6.5 million. He's kind of what you have already internally.
I was going to say he's basically equaling out, or he's canceling out what Torey Krug would be, and right now with Torey Krug on the book still, because he's not an LTIR, you got $1.2 million in cap space. You thought the same thing I did. I don't think this is going to get done anytime soon, but it is always important to remember when teams build relationships with other teams and have conversations about players. Ryan O'Reilly started at the draft and got it done at the right before the season began. Braden Shen was the same way. Jay Bouwmeester, people remember, that was a conversation that had been ongoing for a couple of years before the Blues and Calgary Flames made that deal. If the Blues look at this and say, like, hey, our power play's not working out, or hey, like, we like where we're at and we kind of want to take another step, keep an eye out for a 30-year-old defenseman that if Calgary's saying we're open for business, there is going to be a fire sale at some point. And if you've already started the conversation, maybe the pieces that Calgary wanted now didn't make sense to Doug Armstrong. maybe in about 6 months, 7 months, it makes a little bit more sense because the team is further along than they originally thought.
You know how the Blues have this roster crunch coming with their forward group with a bunch of different players?
You know how you fix that roster crunch, BK?
Yeah, eventually you say, okay, hey, Calgary, which of these guys is interesting to you? You can pick one of that group, and then you can pick one prospect, and then you can pick one like a lottery ticket type of a guy or a pick, and then boom, you've got the framework of what a trade could potentially look like a year from now. It's just something to keep in the back of your mind.
Absolutely.
As the Blues start looking towards what their future is without potentially Torey Krug long term, maybe Mackenzie Weegar is a guy that makes some sense for them. With Alex Ferrario and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. If you missed any of our conversation with David Pagnotta, be sure to check it out on the podcast page. 101ESPN.com and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers here on BK and Ferrario.
you've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's Questions and Answers.
Presented by WindowWorldSt.Louis.com. Simply the best for less.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. If you guys have any questions, get them in right now on the Air Comfort Service text line or the YouTube chat. It's off and running. YouTube.com/101ESPN-STL. No, seems like everybody's happy today.
Everybody's in a good mood today. I like that.
Cardinals won yesterday.
Okay, well, that's not what I was
nice
talking
outside.
about.
Dude, can we talk about this weather for a second?
Man.
Hot damn. It is beautiful.
Well, not hot damn, cool damn right now because it's nice out there. I've done so much yard work in the past 2 weeks to prep for this point to sit outside. Oh man, yesterday was just gold.
This is like the 1 to 3 week stretch where you live in St. Louis and you're like, who's got it better than us?
This and April. April's the same way where you get out of that winter and it's just oh, hey, 70 degrees.
Yeah, and then week 2 of September is going to be back in the 90s.
Yeah, because
we'll find a way.
In the past,
this is fake fall.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not real fall. Real fall starts in mid-September, late September.
Yep.
This is fake fall.
In the past, I've this time of year, it's 70 degrees, and I tell Katie, I'm just going to close the pool because I'm not going to spend any more money on the chemicals. We're not going to be in there. And the first year we owned the house, I closed it. And then the next day it was 97 degrees. And I'm like, what the hell did I just do?
All right, from the text line, would you guys be disappointed if your kids didn't end up pursuing athletics or at least try to do so? I want them to try things. I would not hey, you have to go do X, Y, or Z. But yeah, try stuff out. I mean, try out anything, right? Try out music, try out athletics, try out art. Do all of the different things to find out what you like, what you enjoy, and then you can decide down the road, hey, I want to pursue this. So if you're talking about would I be disappointed if they didn't play high school football or high school basketball or whatever? No, I don't really care about that, but try it at first.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm going to tell them yes to everything that they want to try, and if they don't like it, I'll give my parents props because they were not the kind that forced me into stuff. If I came to them and said, I don't want to do this anymore, they'd tell me, go do it one more time, see if you're okay with it, and then after that, if you still hate it, then you're done. And they let me always quit.
I was always told, can't quit during the season. If you don't want to do it ever again, that's fine.
Got to finish the commitment.
You got to finish out whatever it is that you start out during the during the season. All right. From the 314, guys, are we hard passing on Kadri? Is that our overall stance on that?
For anybody that was up on YouTube, Grant's mic wasn't up, but if you could have seen Grant's face when Pagnotta said Kadri's available too, you would have expected somebody to tell Grant something horrible.
I almost threw up right in my mouth.
Yeah. I don't know many teams that would be in on Kadri. Maybe Colorado. But for the money he's getting
not
paid,
for that contract.
No. And Calgary would have to eat 50% of it. You're eating 50% of what was that, a 6-year deal?
I'm not. There is no scenario in which I'd be interested.
Yeah, I don't think they're trading. I think they are stuck until the end of the contracts for both Huberdeau and Nazem Kadri.
Yeah, I would need therapy if the Blues traded for Nazem Kadri.
All right, this one comes from Lisa.
Bennington would too.
Why wouldn't the Cardinals play Scott in left and Siani in center field? Defense helps your pitchers. Nootbaar's offense isn't that much better. All the defense is better by Siani and Scott. Why don't you consider doing that? Thank you. Here's the reason why. This offense is already limited. And if you're down on Lars Nootbaar after this season, that's fair. He has certainly not lived up to expectations. But if you're looking at okay, let's go left fielders this season in Major League Baseball, because you're probably going to have your everyday right fielder in Jordan Walker. So left field is really what we're talking about here, right? The guys that have, let's call it at least 200 plate appearances from left field so far this year, almost all of them are above league average offensively. There are 20 left fielders in Major League Baseball that are at least league average or better. If you put a guy like Michael Siani out there, he will almost certainly be the worst offensive player that plays regularly in left field in Major League Baseball. Same thing would be true for Victor Scott. So that's why you don't do it, because the bar to clear offensively is just so much higher in a corner outfield spot than it is in center field, because center field is viewed more as a defensive position.
There are two teams in the National League that have scored less runs than you, and those two teams are the Miami Marlins and the Washington Nationals. And if you double down and say both Victor Scott and Michael Siani are on our team and everyday players, your offense takes a further step back because now you're plucking somebody out. You might not believe in Lars Nootbaar right now, but he still has provided more offense and has more offensive potential than either Victor Scott or Michael Siani.
Let me put it this way. There are 9 guys in the National League that have played at least 300 plate appearances in left field. 9 of them. 8 of them are above league average offensively. So you would have one of 2 players this year offensively that is below league average in left field. Spencer Steer is the other who projects to be an above league average offensive player. So it's just not a way that you want to construct your lineup. Brendan Donovan is more of a what you would expect out of a left fielder offensively. And that's at a minimum. Like you've got to be at least that good offensively. So that's why I would not go with those 2 guys. I like both players. They are redundant though, and so I do think the Cardinals are probably going to have to choose one or the other. All right, coming up in 15 minutes, we're going to get into some NFL quick hitters. I've got some big picture questions for both Alex and Grant that I want to get to. We'll get to those coming up at 12:15. But coming up next, Major League Baseball has an update kinda on their TV contracts and what it could mean for teams like the Cardinals that are associated with Bally Sports. We'll let you hear what that is, and we'll hear from Mo on what the business side of things is looking like for the Cardinals right now. We'll do that all next here on 101 ESPN. With Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley for our friends over at Circa Sports in Illinois. Alex, we use it because they have the best app possible. They have the best odds possible over on Circa Sports in Illinois. They recommend go ahead and check out what the other odds are in other places. So go look at FanDuel. Go look at DraftKings. They believe that you're going to end up coming back to Circa because they've got the best odds for you. One potential example of this. Week number 1 in the NFL. If you wanted to go just pure money lines, they've got the best money line splits in the business. If you want to go money lines, Ravens straight up against the Chiefs, Eagles straight up against the Eagles. On Circa, $10 bet wins you $30. Over on FanDuel, $10 bet wins you $28. Alex, the margins are thin when you're betting on sports. You got to win the most money possible. You're doing that over on Circa.
Well, and you know, BK, it's parlay city right now for your boys. So with Thursday and Friday night football games, I'm putting a big parlay together. And here's the deal. I put $10 on picking the Ravens plus the points, the Packers plus the points. $10 on that gets me $75 over on the Circa Sports app. If I do that on any other sports betting app, I'm only getting $60. You always get the most money possible, and you're not getting limited based off of your winnings over at Circa Sports Illinois. Download it today, get set for football season, and bet with BK and Ferrario. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
It's time for a Bally Sports Update with Alex and Grant. I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex, we are into year 4 of the Diamond Sports bankruptcy case.
We're getting there.
Which means that we are still talking about what the future holds for the Cardinals and the Blues as it pertains to their TV rights deals.
BK, the light is at the end of the tunnel. We can see it.
We're not sure if that's a train coming in the other direction
or coming at you.
If we're going out of the tunnel. But yes, there is a light nonetheless. So here's what The Athletic had to say earlier today. If Major League Baseball teams are unsure of how much local TV revenue they'll make in 2025, they could choose to hold their wallets shut during the winter. This is according to multiple executives, and they said that was one concern that people had last year ahead of what turned out to be a down winter in free agent spending. They continued. The 9 Major League Baseball teams under contract with Diamond, should it still exist, for the 2025 season are the Braves, the Reds, Tigers, Royals, Angels, Marlins, Brewers, Cardinals, and the Rays.
Ooh. Last
sentence here. Major League Baseball teams' local TV revenues represent roughly 12 to 32%, significant gap there, of any given team in terms of their overall team revenue, with the majority of teams sitting around an average of 21%, end quote. So the update here was essentially, there ain't a whole lot to update you guys on. There's expected to be another hearing coming up in like October or so, and that's where they should have more of an update on where things stand with the company, what their plan is to get out of bankruptcy, and then it's up to Major League Baseball to decide, in the court, well, is this a viable plan, or is this just you hoping and praying that you're able to make this a viable company once again? Alex, to me, if there is one North Star that we always follow for the Cardinals, it is, what's the payroll going to be? Mm-hmm. Because the payroll will dictate so many other things about what they decide to do. It dictates, do you make trades? Do you go into free agency? Are you going to add anything of significance? Are you subtracting something of significance? That is the North Star that guides their decision-making. And what this makes difficult is finding what that North Star is going to be. I don't know what the Cardinals' payroll is going to be next year because, frankly, I'm not sure they know right now what their payroll should be expected to be next year. I do think it will go down. I do not think what it is today is what it will be on opening day of next year. But reading between the lines, Alex, kind of trying to figure this stuff out, how much of a factor do you think that the TV rights stuff will have in what the Cardinals decide to do or don't do this offseason?
I think it's going to have a very large impact, and I think we've already started to see the writings on the wall. At the trade deadline, we heard from multiple people state that the Cardinals' focus was getting the salary off of the books, and if they were bringing something in, it was money in, money out. And we saw that moving off of Tommy Edman and bringing in Eric Fetty and then essentially DFAing Tommy Pham when they felt like they were out of this. So I think the Cardinals, whether you believe they're smart with personnel, they're smart on the business side of things because they realize that there's not a whole lot of money coming in right now. This TV deal might be a disaster for us, and so it's time to start getting money off of the books. They started that process at the trade deadline, and my assumption is that process is going to carry over into the start of the offseason. I think you're going to see a lot of guys that the Cardinals don't deem worthy of them going through the arbitration process with if they feel like it's more money than they feel it's deserved. I think they're going to try and trade some massive contracts that they don't think is worthy of being on their books. And I think they're going to walk away from free agents like Paul Goldschmidt because they view this as, hey, we are going to have to take a step back for a couple of years financially before we can take a step forward.
From the 314, guys, how has the Bally's deal impacted the Blues? They seem to spend to the cap and continue to push despite the uncertainty with their deal. So there are a couple of differences that are important to point out, one of which I'm going to have to ask Alex for a clarification on because I think it's true, but I'm not entirely positive on this. And I don't want to speak out of my behind, if possible.
I do it a lot.
So one of the reasons why that's the case is because the NHL has been essentially told by Bally, hey, your 2024 rights deals, they're in place, they're secure, you're good here. The Cardinals and Major League Baseball in general has not necessarily been told that about the 2025 season yet. So that is one key difference, and that's the most important difference. The other is just how the two sports operate could not be more different. If I am understanding the way that it works in hockey specifically, teams get revenue sharing. Like, the reason why the cap is in place is because there's like this pot of gold essentially that then gets redistributed amongst the teams in terms of what they are able to spend on their players specifically.
That's why those expansions were such a big deal, because all of that money that came in for Vegas and then for Seattle, welcome to the pot of gold in the middle for everyone.
I'm not sure how the rights deals locally play into that. I don't know if that like goes to the team and then it's like there's a portion of it that goes to the league, whatever. But the league has X amount of dollars that are coming in on a revenue basis every year, and X percent of that goes to the players, and that's siphoned off, and that's what the cap becomes. Baseball is different. Baseball is, hey, man, your revenue is your revenue, and you get to decide how much of that you spend on players and how much of that you spend on coaches and how much of that you spend on a ballpark village thing that is totally disconnected from baseball. Let's make that very clear.
It's not a part of
it. Their revenue is theirs to do with however they deem necessary. It's the only sport that operates that way. The players want it that way. I think sometimes they're cutting their nose to spite their face by doing that. I think now, given where we're at, it could actually be helpful for players to get a floor in place, and the only way that the owners would do that is if they also have a ceiling, but I digress. That's another conversation for another day when we get into CBA negotiations. That is the biggest difference. So this affects the Cardinals in a way that it does not, cannot, and would not affect the Blues because the two sports just operate differently.
Yeah.
Alex, let's hear from John Mozela.
Uh-oh.
Because he is, as of today, the guy that will be making these decisions. He was on KMOX over the weekend, and here's what he had to say about, he was asked about the lack of butts in seats, but then it dovetailed into a business conversation in general.
Our performance, our record is probably indicative of, why we're starting to see smaller crowds. But, it's something that, from a business standpoint and a strategy standpoint, we're going to have to try to understand what the future looks like from that standpoint. Obviously, we know we're going to have an uphill climb with what the TV market's going to look like moving forward. And so, we're going to have our challenges. And so, I think our side's going to have to recalibrate a little bit. And I'm still hopeful, though, our fan base will support us and appreciate what we're trying to do. But, I can understand that level of frustration, too.
How do you think that one's going to go over with the fans, Alex?
Not great. Not great. And once again, kind of a PR disaster coming at them sooner rather than later. It's one of those things that you have to address it, but it's just the way he addresses it feels like it's just, I don't know, for a lack of a better phrase, like it's rubbing salt in the wound of it. It's like, yeah, look, we don't really know what the financial climate looks like, and butts in the seats are obviously affecting this, and some of this is on the roster that we put together, but if we don't get butts in the seats, then we're not going to get there. Like, it all just feels like it meshes together every single time we talk about the TV deal, and it just always goes back to we don't have anybody coming to the games, and if we don't have that and the TV deal's falling through, then how can we spend money?
On a personal level, I kind of like Mo, and part of that is probably because he has some of the same issues that I do with it when it comes to tone, and I find most of the conversations that we've had with Mo, whether it's on the radio or just off the record, whatever, to be pretty pleasant. Like, I find him to be an enjoyable guy to be around, and he's a super smart baseball guy. Like, some of the stuff that he can enlighten us on, like, it's really interesting a lot of the time. That being said, I would tell Mo this, man, is some of the messaging bad. Like, just so bad. Alex, it's been the case now for a few years, and I think Cardinals fans are just fed up with it, and our text line is certainly an indicator on that, 314-399-9646. People not super thrilled with what they heard there.
What?
I think the biggest thing to me, sometimes it's okay to just lie. And what I mean by that is, it's probably true that their revenue changing because there are fewer fans going to the games will dictate that payroll needs to go down. That's probably true from a just purely business sense, right? You bring in less money, you spend less money. That's fair. Alex, there are so many reasons as to why Cardinals fans would be okay right now with them taking a step back financially. So many. If they had rationalized this by saying, we need to go young, I think there's a decent portion of the fan base right now that would be like, you know what? That makes sense. I'm in favor of that.
This team's not great. Let's see what the young kids got.
If they said, hey, listen, we would like to spend more this offseason, but we are just so hampered by what we have with our TV situation, it's not feasible for us. And they could point to other teams that have done the same, including the team that won the World Series last year with the Texas Rangers, who said, yeah, we'd like Jordan Montgomery, we just can't do it, and we're going to sit on our hands all offseason because we don't have a TV deal that we feel comfortable with right now. The Minnesota Twins literally subtracted money from their roster. They did nothing last offseason, and they're a pretty good team right now despite that. So you could also convince fans, hey, because of this TV situation, we can't really do a whole lot this offseason. And fans, while frustrating, would be okay, I get it, even if I hate it. This is the one thing you cannot do. You cannot say, and Bill DeWitt III also said this earlier in the season, hey, because there are fewer fans going to games, we are going to spend less. You can believe that internally. You cannot say it publicly because it is so bad for business.
Well,
dude.
and also don't chuckle at it, too, like Bill DeWitt III did. When you chuckle at, there are just times that somebody texted in perfect, BK, from the 573, or not from the 573, forget who it was, but they basically said, Mo feels like it's always talking at you, not to you. Yeah. BK suffers from a lot of that. Believe me, I live this on a day-to-day basis. But, I mean, when the
I can recognize that in others because I can't recognize it in myself.
When the messaging feels like an attack, that's where fans start to get really frustrated. And it also feels like at times you're told one thing. It feels like either an off-season ago or 2 off-seasons ago it was, well, no, we don't feel like TV is going to really impact what we have to spend. And then
totally.
2 years later, it's, well, TV is going to impact what we spend.
And to be fair, things have changed, right? 2 years ago, my life was a lot different. 2 years ago, I could have gone to my wife and been like, hey, can we take a month trip to, I don't know, Alaska, whatever, right?
2 years ago, I had 1 kid.
And maybe the answer would have been yes. Now, if I say the same thing, the answer would be a resounding no. We have a lot of changes that have happened in our life over the last few years. But the TV thing is real. It is a legitimate question that a lot of teams are facing right now, Cardinals just being one of them. But I think we also have a lot of texts, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line that say, hey, guys, the payroll just isn't even the issue anymore. At this point, It's not about what they spend. It's about how they spend. And it's about other teams just being better at developing players, at finding the right guys to spend that money on during the offseason, and that is 100% true as well. So a lot of this goes back to the Paul Goldschmidt thing, and we don't have to spend much time on it. We talked about it yesterday, but Goldie's been legitimately good offensively, since July 1st, basically. And I am fascinated to see what they do with him this offseason, because if it is true that payroll is going to take a significant step back going into next year, there's almost no way that you can rationalize paying Paul Goldschmidt going into next season $15+ million, even if you think he's going to be really good. It doesn't make sense for this team where they're at, what they need, what they're missing, to do that going into the offseason, to just bring back a guy that's already here on a team that is clearly not good enough to contend for anything meaningful. So, man, that's going to be a fascinating offseason decision, and I'm sure the Cardinals will make the right one because
they'll handle it well.
Coming up next, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters here on 101 ESPN. All right, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters. I've got some big picture questions, NFL related, that I like to get your guys' thoughts on. You good with that?
Let's do it.
All right, let's start out with this.
I am an NFL connoisseur.
Yesterday, it was announced that Trent Williams has re-signed, extended with the 49ers. It was technically considered to be like a restructure, I suppose, of his contract. He got all of the money. Brandon Ayuk got all of the money. Christian McCaffrey appears to be fine health-wise. I hope so, because I got him in our fantasy draft last night, so fingers crossed.
God, I hope he goes down quick.
Alex, the 49ers, all of the stuff that was the bad vibes in the offseason has basically been put onto the back burner. All the guys are back at practice. They're going for it one more time. Is it gonna be a normal season now for the 49ers? And can we put all of that stuff to the side and now we just look at the football and we're like, okay, 49ers still one of the best teams in the NFL. Do you feel that way, or do you think all of that stuff is gonna linger?
No, I feel the 49ers are completely different than the Cincinnati Bengals. I think the Bengals is going to linger. The 49ers feels like, all right, we got our business done. Now, it feels like they're kicking the can down the road. It feels like next offseason we're going to be in this exact same position with Trent Williams, with Deebo Samuel, with Brock Purdy. But it feels like in season, everybody on that team understands the job at hand, and that's we have a shot to win the Super Bowl this year. Been there a lot over these last couple of years. We've got the team in place. It feels like they have the proper leadership in place that can settle all of the outside noise for a season and then kick the can down the road again next year. So, no, I'm viewing the 49ers as the dominant team in the NFC once again.
I am too. And to me, like, even if Brandon Ayuk didn't end up signing in San Francisco, they were still the number 2 team, at least in the NFC, maybe just to the Detroit Lions, because they still had a lot of weapons. They still have a good defense. With Ayuk back, they're the same team. So I don't see them taking any steps back. I see them being the same exact team as last year, and I see them being right up there for the Super Bowl again.
I think so too, guys. I think that during the offseason, at all turns, I said, I think this is going to get resolved. I think Brandon Ayuk is going to be a 49er, whether that's via an extension, which is what ended up happening, or just the 49ers saying, we'll see it in week 1. He's not going to miss out on game checks. Like, it didn't make sense for him to do so, and it didn't make sense for them after the draft had passed to trade him for future assets. That'd be silly for a team trying to contend for a Super Bowl this year. So I think they're going to be really good. Could some of this stuff linger if they get off to a bad start this year? Absolutely. I think that's the fear. I just think they're so talented and the schedule is so forgiving early on that I don't think that's going to be the case. They start week 1 against the Jets. That could be tough. I could totally see a scenario Monday night next week. 49ers play against the Jets. It's at home and they lose that game. And on Tuesday, we're like, oh, about to go off the rails. And then they play Minnesota and the Rams and the Patriots and the Cardinals and the Seahawks. And we're like, oh, they're 5-1 going into Kansas City. Team's still pretty good. So I think they're going to end up being a very good team once again this year, and they're going to end up making the playoffs. The next thing that I do want to ask about, though, this could be a team that you would consider here. We typically have 2 or 3 new teams that make the postseason every year from either conference. Alex, if you had to call your shot today, and you had to say, this is the one team that I'm most confident that missed the playoffs last year that will make it this year, and the team that made the playoffs last year that will miss it this year. Maybe it's from the same conference, maybe they're from different, but the team that is going to be in that wasn't, and the team that is going to be out that was, who would be those 2 teams for you going into this season?
I'll start with the team that's in it that wasn't last year. It's the Chicago Bears. Wow, I think there are 3 playoff teams from the NFC North this season. I think the 49ers are in. I think 1 team in the NFC East is in, and 1 team in the NFC South is in. I think the NFC North is going to be the team that's got the playoffs, and I'm excited about that offense. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be kind of like what Detroit was last year, where, man, it is hitting on all cylinders, and I think they got at least somewhat of the defense in place. If I had to pick 1 team, call my shot, that's not in the playoffs that was in it last year, it's the Miami Dolphins. I'm not so sold on Miami. I know they've got all of their weapons, but I think they're going to deal with injuries. I think they're already dealing with some of that. I know Hill and Waddle are going to be healthy for week 1, but that worries me. And it always seems to be with the Miami Dolphins. It starts out great, falls apart. Tua's got all of his money now, so I'm not sold on the Miami Dolphins. Cincinnati's the easy one for me, but I'm not sold on Miami either.
To me, I'm going to go with the Atlanta Falcons making the playoffs just because of that division. I don't like the Buccaneers this season. Baker Mayfield, I have no trust in him. I think the Falcons have a clear-cut path to that division winner, and I don't see the Buccaneers competing for that again, so I think the Falcons are in this year.
So that's your just flip those two in that team. I like that. That is one that I considered as well. If I was going to try to be a little bit more bold, the team that I think is going to make the playoffs this year that missed last year, Alex, you know who I'm going to say here. It's the Colts.
Yeah.
I think the Colts are being completely slept on. And really, this comes down to how good is Anthony Richardson. Because last year, they won 9 games. Guys, they won 9 games with Gardner Minshew as their almost every week penciled-in starter. Team wasn't very good last year. They had a running back situation that was abysmal. You want to talk about bad vibes for these other teams that had contract disputes going into the offseason? Dude, Jonathan Taylor's contract dispute was real, and it got ugly between he and the team. And then he barely played the first month of the season. He never really felt like he was 100% throughout the year. I think the Colts have a chance to be an 11-win team that we all look back at and we're like, what? Where did that come from? And a lot of that is because I think Anthony Richardson has a chance to be legitimately special. Like Cam Newton, early career Cam, I think Anthony Richardson could be that. The team that I think is most likely to fall out of the postseason this year is the Pittsburgh Steelers. They won 10 games.
Sorry, Grant.
Somehow found a way to get in last year. I do not believe in them. But if I was, again, trying to be a little bit more bold on a team that you look back at, you're like, whoa, what happened there? I'll go with the Eagles.
That was another team I was kind of wondering. I don't know if they make it either.
I think they're too talented to be what I'm suggesting. I think they're going to win 10 games, most likely. But if I was going to get bold, I'd look over to the NFC and be like, you know what? I think there's a few teams, especially NFC West-wise. I could see the Seahawks being pretty good, 49ers good, Rams good. I could see this going really well for a lot of these teams. And then you look at the Eagles and you're like, okay, maybe the Cowboys just end up being a really good regular season team once again. The Eagles win 9 games and just miss out in the playoffs. So I could see that being one of the other teams. Alex, you just kind of answered this question briefly by talking about the team that you think is going to miss out. The end of the year, how will we view Mike McDaniel? How will we look at Mike McDaniel as an NFL head coach at the end of the 2024 season? Because right now, I think unanimously thought to be at a minimum top 10 coach in the NFL, one of the bright minds offensively in the NFL. Is that still going to be the case after this year?
It is, and I think if they miss the playoffs, it's not going to be because of Mike McDaniel. It's going to be because of Tua. I said at the moment that guy got the contract, I think you're overpaying for him. I don't think he's the proper guy to help you win. Obviously, you're really relying on Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle being those dominant forces for you. Your offense is supposed to be high-flying. They've done that with Mike McDaniel. They've done everything I've needed to see them do, and it's not like what the Chargers were last year, to where it was like I watched them play games and thought, man, the coach is the reason this team is losing. Time management, he just makes the worst calls at the worst time ever. Same with Mike McCarthy in the playoffs. I don't think the Dolphins are going to be a fault of Mike McDaniel. I think it's going to be a fault of the quarterback that they have, and Tua is not the guy to get them to the promised land.
How do you feel about that one, Grant? How do you think that we will look at Mike McDaniel as a head coach by the end of the season?
I think it's going to be pretty much the same as we do now because, you've gone 2 seasons now. Both times they've lost in the first round of the playoffs. And you're going to have a coach that you see offensively as one of the best in the league, and defensively they struggle. Now, that's probably more on the players, not the coach, but you're going to have, Mike McDaniel. The way you're going to view Mike McDaniel is just an offensive powerhouse and maybe a team that's going to struggle defensively, to me, and a team that is not going to get the job done in the playoffs.
I think we will see the Dolphins as the AFC's version of the Cowboys. A lot of regular season success,
which is basically what I just explained.
And you look back on it, you're like, yeah, but it was all empty calories. Yep. And we see this in the NBA a lot, where you'll have a regular season team that puts up these crazy numbers offensively, and then you get into the playoffs and it's like, oh, people really clamp down defensively. What you were doing no longer works anymore. We see it all the time. I think that's what the Dolphins are potentially going to be. They're going to have to change the way that they operate. The way that they play is so much freaking fun. I love it. As just a fan of the sport, just watching it, it's like playing basketball. It's all about pace and space, right? But then you get into the postseason, it's like, oh, it's freezing ass cold outside. And you have big men that are playing this physical brand of football. The Chiefs had to do this. It takes time. And eventually it comes down to, hey, can you win in the line of scrimmage? And if you can't, you cannot win in the postseason. And they're a team that has shown time and time again now can't win in the postseason because we don't have the line of scrimmage. So it's something that I think will have to get fixed. I do think he's still a really good coach, but I think there will be a lot of casual observers that look at them the way that they look at the Cowboys right now, which is cool. Yeah, win your 10, 11, 12 games in the regular season. We're going to get to the playoffs, and you're going to be a fraud. And we all know exactly how that's going to go.
Guess who I blame for the Dallas Cowboys' faults in the playoffs? Just as much as Mike McCarthy, I blame the quarterback, too.
All right. So I saw Mina Kimes do this, and I wanted to get your guys' thoughts. Because she put together her list of the most watchable teams in the NFL.
Ooh, okay.
Not necessarily the best, but the teams that, like, you see them on Red Zone and you're excited to see what's about to happen. So a lot of this is about the offense, if we're just being totally honest about it. I've got my rankings for you guys. I am curious how you feel about it, okay?
Okay.
My number one most watchable team in the NFL
if you
going
say
into this
Chiefs,
season.
I am going to Will Smith you right now on the radio.
They are not at the top of my list.
Good, because they're boring.
The Houston Texans.
Bing, bing, bing,
I
bing,
find the
bing.
Houston Texans to be, going into the season, the most watchable team in the NFL. CJ Stroud, I think, has the highest approval rating of any quarterback in the league. Everybody seems to like the guy. He obviously had an unbelievable season last year. Number one for me, they've got the quarterback. They've got a coach that people like. They're super fun. They added all these explosive elements. They've got Joe Mixon now. For me, Texans number one, most watchable team going into the season.
That's mine. I think it's easy. I think that offense, from every single angle, it's got you excited. Wide receivers, tight end, running back, quarterback, and then you add in what the defense could be and some of the high players that they have. Yeah, that's number one on my list.
I think one for me that I would throw in there is Detroit, which they're one of the best teams in the league, so it makes sense.
Not in my top five.
Really?
What? I will continue from here.
Okay, well, that's terrible. This
Number two. Some of this is because of the freshness of it. There's nothing really fresh about the Lions offense right now for me. I saw it last year. So every player that's going to play a significant role for them was there last season. Still exciting, still fun, don't get me wrong, but not as fresh.
Kind of like watching the Kansas City Chiefs for the last 5 years.
Number two, the Packers. I think the Packers have a chance with Josh Jacobs as their number one running back going into this season to be a top 5 offense in the NFL. I really enjoyed what we saw from Jordan Love last year. I've got the Packers at number 2. Number 3, the Chicago Bears. Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift. That you can't get much more fresh than the youth and the excitement that they've injected into that team. Number 4, Alex, come on. You know I wasn't going to go through my top 5 without the Kansas City Chiefs.
Stupid list.
Kansas City Chiefs at number 4 on my list. Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, offensive line improvements. I like the Chiefs at number 4. And at number 5 for me, the Arizona Cardinals. I think the Cardinals are getting slept on this year as a really interesting, fun, frisky, like 7-win team. Kyler Murray back for the entirety of the season. I liked what we saw from him at the second half of last year. Marvin Harrison Jr. going to be inserted into the mix as well. Trey McBride, one of the best young tight ends in the NFL. Arguably the best tight end right now in the NFL. Still go Kelsey in a playoff game, but for the season, potentially Trey McBride. If you get him in your fantasy draft, that's a good one. So yeah, my number 1, Texans. 2, Packers. 3, Bears. 4, Chiefs. 5, Cardinals. How do you guys feel about that?
Terrible not having the Lions in there. Mine, 1 is the Texans, 2 is the Lions, 3 was the Packers. I am excited to see the Packers. 4 is the Bills. I'm very excited to see that team without Stephon Diggs and see what it looks like. For better or worse, it might look awful, but I'm very excited about it. And number 5, I hate them, but they're still an exciting team to watch, the Cowboys. It's still fun to watch CeeDee Lamb. Like, he's the guy that...
The tough part is, though, like, name your second most exciting playmaker beyond CeeDee Lamb on that team.
They're both the second and third of defensive players. Yeah. Like Micah Parsons and Trayvon Diggs.
Very much, man.
But that's why I'm watching it, because how in the hell is CeeDee Lamb still doing that when everybody knows he's getting the ball? It's a team that, like, if you're going to ask me the most, like, exciting team, the watchable team, it still is the Cowboys. They're at the bottom of this list, but they're there.
I would still have the Lions there for this reason. And I know there's not much new there, but talking about like having a red zone on and who you're excited to see, you never know what the Lions are going to do. They might go for it on 4th and 10. They might do a fake punt, fake field goal. Like, you never know what to expect with that team, which for me just adds a lot of entertainment value. So anytime they come up, I'm like, what's going to happen here?
That's fair. I just don't get excited to watch Jared Goff. Like, that part of this is I really want to watch C.J. Stroud and Jordan Love and Caleb Williams and Patrick Mahomes and Kyler Murray. Goff doesn't give me those same like warm fuzzy feelings.
No,
It's also why the Falcons didn't make my list, because I'm not
Dan
super excited
Campbell
to
does.
watch Kirk Cousins either.
Yeah, but Dan Campbell gets my jollies all riled up.
We are one day away from the start of the
Dan
NFL
Campbell's
season.
like 4th and 20 on my own
versus
line.
Chiefs pregame coverage right here on your home of the NFL in St. Louis, 101 ESPN. Ravens versus Chiefs tomorrow night. Pregame coverage starting at 6:30. We'll have that all right here on 101 ESPN. And you can also join The Riz Show and Kerry Davis on Thursday from 6:30 to 8:30 at Hot Shots in St. Charles. The NFL season kickoff is tomorrow night. Get signed up for some 101 ESPN and Point giveaways. Hang out with Riz and CD at Hot Shots in St. Charles. Also, check out the Pick'em Challenge over at 101ESPN.com as well. Be sure to get your picks in before tomorrow night's game. Coming up next, Alex, I've got a question for you. What is realistic, Alex, to expect from Jake Neighbours this season? Don't tell me 30 goals.
I've
but
already
if it
answered
is,
this.
All right, we'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care. If you're in the market for an HVAC system, a heating system, now is the time to do it. And now that the weather's starting to cool off, it doesn't feel like it's pressurized as much because it's not 115 degrees outside if you're updating your HVAC system. But I do tell you to call Classic Air Care and get them out today, because starting on January 1st, prices go up for the HVAC system because of a refrigerant government regulation on their new refrigerant that is going to be used in the systems. If you buy it beyond January 1st, Classic Air Care tells me that it's going to go up 15 to 20% more than you're already spending. And look, HVAC systems are already expensive, but take advantage of that opportunity now before those regulations go into play on January 1st. They've got financing available for you. They've got a maintenance agreement once you get that new system to keep it up and running and give you the longest lifespan of that HVAC system you can ask for. Use the knowledgeable technicians. Use the company that takes care of you, and that's Classic Air Care. You can schedule online, or you could give them a call and tell them Alex Ferrario sent you. Classic Air Care, that's classicaircare.com.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Cardinals eked out a win last night in the 12th inning against the Brewers, 7-4 in Game 2 of that series. Steven Matz, coming off his IL stint, went 4 2/3 innings, had 3 hits against him, 3 earned runs against, and 7 strikeouts. And today, the Cardinals will look to win this series against the Brewers as they'll finish this series in Milwaukee. It'll be Sonny Gray on the mound for the Cardinals, going up against Colin Ray for the Brewers. First pitch tonight will be at 6:40. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
All right, Alex, so the St. Louis Post-Dispatch is doing a series right now of the 10 biggest questions heading into the 2024 season, and one of their questions, I think it was number 10, was what do you expect from Jake Neighbours heading into 2024? And the truth is, hey, man, Doug Armstrong doesn't seem to know. He told us at the end of season press availability, listen, I loved what we saw from Jake Neighbours this year. I just need to see if that's real. Like, if what we saw this year is something that he's just going to be annually, or if it was just a really good opening, like debut, full season for Neighbours. He came out and immediately produced 25-plus goals at the age of 22 years old. It almost never happens. The only other guy to do that at his age in the last 20 years, Alex, for the Blues, was Jaden Schwartz. It's Neighbours, Schwartz, that's it. And there are some similarities, honestly, in the way that they play. Different, but similarities nonetheless, and the fact that they just go to the front of the net. Alex, if you were to do this again prior to his age 24 birthday, he would join 4 other players in Blues history that had 25 or more goals twice prior to their 23rd birthday. I say that to allow you the opportunity to discuss with our audience what you are expecting from Neighbours this year. Not what is possible, what the ceiling is for his performance. No. The expectation for Jake Neighbours heading into this season is blank.
The expectation for Jake Neighbours is 30 goals, in my opinion. Because
that is just such a high bar to clear.
It is, but I'm going off of what he just did, and I'm looking at.
What do you think he's capable of then? Like, if the expectation, like, you go into the season, you're like, if he does not get this, it is a disappointing season for Jake Neighbours. If that is the expectation, is 30 goals, are you saying like 40 goals is in his range of outcomes?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, as a power forward, yes, I'm saying it. Now, I don't think it's I don't think it's a failure if this guy is scoring 25 goals next season. Like, I need people to understand that what I'm expecting versus what's considered success are two different things. Because if this guy is just a consistent 25 goal scorer, man, that's a win for the Blues. Because a lot of people view Jake Neighbours as just a third line winger, not a dude who should be playing top line. But here's my reasoning why my expectation's at 30 goals. If you pull up NHL Edge and look at where Jake Neighbours shot and where he scored the majority of his goals and compare it to Zach Hyman. And I know they're not the same player, but Zach Hyman scored 38 goals standing on the doorstep of the net.
Yep.
Jake Neighbours scored 16 of them. 4 of them he's standing like in the crease. Zach Hyman scored 6 of them. But Zach Hyman averaged 19 and a half minutes last season. Jake Neighbours averaged 15 and a half. He went from being a fourth liner to a third liner to a second liner to a fringe top liner, then back to the second line. And here's where my expectation comes in for him. We all agree that Jake Neighbours showed the ability to play on the top line last season. He wasn't a liability defensively. He went to the front of the net. He provided something that nobody else does on that team that could play with Robert Thomas. If that dude is going to be getting 18 to 19 minutes a night playing with Robert Thomas, why couldn't he be a 30-goal scorer? He had the exact same shooting percentage as Zach Hyman last year. Hyman had an 18.6 shooting percentage. He took 290 shots. Jake Neighbours took 145 shots. If you double the amount of shots, which I know is a tough thing to ask, but if you're putting him on the ice for 3 more minutes a game, that's multiple more shifts in the offensive zone that he has the opportunity with what the NHL deemed a top 10 centerman in the National Hockey League. If you've got that And if they don't screw this up by playing Pavel Buchnevich as the second-line center and keep him on the top line, why couldn't he hit 30 goals?
What was his shooting percentage last year?
18.6%.
Here's my concern. That he's not going to consistently be an 18% shooting percentage guy.
But 18% shooting percentage versus off of the rush versus standing in the front of the net is a lot more doable.
100%. But if you get more shots, the odds of all of those shots being where they were last year, very low. Yeah. So the shooting percentage you would expect to take a step back, shots go up, and you're still going to get more goals because you're just shooting more often. But I think that there's a pretty good chance. Like, I would take a heavy under, like 12%, 14%, somewhere around there would be a pretty good season probably for him shooting percentage-wise. The season that last year reminded me of a bit in terms of just the goal-scoring prowess was what we got in 2022 from Ivan Barbashev. I was called a hater. I was called like a lot of different names. They were very nasty on the text line about me.
Probably.
But I say, listen, you know, I think Ivan Barbashev's a really good player. I don't think that he's probably a consistent 25-plus goal scorer. And this, I'm not saying this just to say, like, I was right, everybody else was wrong. No. Ivan Barbashev is still a really good hockey player. And over the last 2 seasons, he has combined for 35 goals. But he's a winning player that gets into winning situations. He's a 45-point producer, that kind of a guy. I think that's probably where we will see Jake Neighbours settle in as well. I think he's probably long-term like a middle six forward, second or third liner, a good player that you love having on your team, and gets you a consistent like 20 to 25 goals is what I'm expecting out of Jake Neighbours. And if he ends up becoming more than that, dude, that is such a massive win for the Blues. Such a massive win. But it's hard for me to go into the season expecting more than 25 goals out of Jake Neighbours again because of how high of a bar that is to clear, man. There are just not a lot of guys that are capable of doing that at his age. And if he becomes one, holy hell, what a find that they had.
I think power forwards are just such a unique brand of player in the National Hockey League, and those guys can't succeed unless they have a proper line with them. Because a lot of times you see power forwards, like Alexei Toropchenko's a great example. Like he's a big guy that should be considered a power forward, but one, he's a fourth liner, and two, he doesn't play the same way. I think when you've got a guy who understands his role and goes to the front of the net and stands there are more opportunities that create themselves for a guy like Jake Neighbours. He's going to get number one power play time because I don't think they have another net front presence on this team. Okay. And last year he played majority on the second power play unit until the end. And we were talking about the shooting percentage. So let's hypothetically look at it and say shots on goal. He gets 200 of them next season. If he gets 30 goals off of 200 shots, that's a 15% shooting percentage. Probably still steep.
That's pretty high.
But you're hoping he shoots more. And that's going to be the biggest thing with Jake Neighbours. If you become a guy that refuses to shoot or a guy that just stands there and expects things to come to you, then you're not going to be that.
Like Pavel Buchnevich, for example, had 200 shots last year. Like, how many shots are you expecting him to have?
Again, it all comes down to where you're playing him, because if he's not getting top line minutes, then this changes everything. And if my expectations are for him to be 30 goals, my expectations are for him to be on your top line.
But how many shots? You just
I'd
said
say
like
about 200. No, 200.
Okay.
Hyman had 290 last year, and that's steep, and that's playing 19 and a half. But I mean, 200 shots. 200 shots, you're talking about 15% shooting percentage.
Yeah, and I just don't. I would not expect that.
Yeah. I think
I guess that's probably where our two places kind of diverge. Is like I can't expect a 15% shooting percentage. I would expect closer to like 10, and then hope for a little bit more. And 200 shots is also like Pavel Buchnevich is putting that up every year. Am I suddenly going to assume that like we're going to see more shots out of Jake Neighbours than out of Pavel Buchnevich? I don't know, man. I don't know that this is a team that's going to play with the pace that is necessary to be able to get those kinds of shot opportunities.
I just think he's different than Buchnevich, because Buch is very much like Barbashev, where Barbashev was a guy that would score in front of the net, but more times than not, he would try and create it off of the rush. Neighbours doesn't seem like a rush type of player. Neighbours seems like I'm a dude that's going to go stand in front of the net, and we'll see what happens from there. That's why I do look a lot like what Zach Hyman just has done with Edmonton and think, man, he plays just like Zach Hyman does. It's just a matter of, can you do it for 82 games?
A few things for me on this. Number one, like, BK, when you bring up Ivan Barbashev in the season that he had, the difference for me is when Barbashev had his 26-goal season, he was 26. Jake Neighbours is 22 right now. Like, Jake Neighbours should still be on the upward trajectory of his career.
Sure.
The other thing about that is last year, his first real full season in the NHL, because there were a lot of doubts of Jake Neighbours' preseason last year going into game one. Like, it wasn't like he was set in stone to be in the lineup, which seems crazy to talk about now. But this time last year, we weren't talking about Jake Neighbours as an X factor. That being said, he was averaging in the first half of the season about 14 minutes on the ice. Second half of the season, he was averaging about 16 minutes on the ice. So he's going to get more opportunity. On top of that, he didn't really see power play time until, Craig Berube got fired in December?
Yeah.
So he's going to have a couple more months of power play time. Like, balance that out. I do think the expectation should be 25 to 30 again because he's going to get more opportunity than he did last season, and he already hit that. And he's going to also be in that role for longer. Like, when he was net front last year, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, that was really his first time being net front in a power play, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He was a bumper in the junior hockey league.
Exactly. So he's gotten almost a full season of experience with that now. It should only get better or at least stay the same. So, yeah, I could definitely see it.
I have a tough time with that always because, like, we assume everything's going to get better, and then sometimes it doesn't. It goes back, or there's this rubber band effect, right, where, like, Jake Neighbours might be a better player this year with worse numbers. That is entirely possible. And he finishes the year, and it's like, hey, man, he had 23 goals, 40 points, was much better defensively, did continue to contribute on the power play, but for whatever reason, the puck didn't quite go the right direction, right? A couple of different times. Or instead of taking a shot, he ended up having a guy that was wide open in the slot. He passed it over there, so his assist numbers go up a little bit more this year because he's taking more of the defense towards him. So, like, I think it's possible he has a better season this year with worse goal production than he did last year. I hope you guys are right, though. I would love nothing more than to see Jake Neighbours put up 45 goals this year. Yep. That'd be fantastic for everybody involved.
Real quick before we break, when Bannister took over, to Grant's point, and he got more power play time, in 49 games he scored 7 power play goals, 49 games. So on top of the even strength goals that he scored last year, you figure if you go 82 games and he doubles that, I mean, you're talking about 14 goals off of the power play.
He's Alex. That's Grant on BK. The Junk Drawer's coming up next.
Open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Brought to you by Fenton Bar and Grill. Best trashed wings in Missouri. Dine in, carry out, 7 days a week.
With Alex and Grant on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. We got to discuss our fantasy football league from last night. The 101 ESPN league did our draft last night. Everybody was there. Everybody paid ahead of time.
There it is.
There were no issues that I'm aware of in terms of the clock. Nobody got angry with me.
Win.
One day. We're 1 day in, but Commissioner BK, it took 3 years. But, boys, I think we have finally figured this thing out. And I am ready to make another resolution.
I like how he says we figured this out when he actually started controversy like the week before the draft when he was like, hey, here's the draft selection. My first round pick is available for trade if somebody wants to do that.
I felt like it was fair that if somebody else wanted to trade slots with me, that was more than okay.
Commissioner just out here making rules.
I figured, hey, if anybody wants Christian McCaffrey or Breece Hall or CeeDee Lamb, whoever your favorite player is in a PPR league, come on up to the number 1 pick. We'll switch slots. We're not trading draft picks like first plus third for a first and a second. No.
Well,
we're just literally trading slots.
If it's that good of a pick, why not just keep it?
Were you going to do like...
Some people value Christian McCaffrey more than I do.
Were you going to do like future considerations or something?
No, it's just you get the first overall selection and then whatever, the 24th, I get whatever your slot is. Like, I'm picking out of the one hole right now.
Pick there.
I didn't want to pick first. I made that very clear. Nobody else wanted it, so I ended up getting the selection. But I think we need to kick T-Bone out.
Why? What happened, man?
I think we got to be done. Every year, that bleeping kid leaves the draft, and I know what Yahoo said. Yahoo said me and Grant left with the best draft. I don't care. Yahoo gets it wrong every time.
Yeah,
I got an A+ for my draft. It was an F draft in my opinion because I had to draft from the first overall pick because Alex framed it that way.
Yeah, Alex did.
I think we got to get rid of T-Bone, man.
I don't think he had that good of a draft
with this kid.
I don't think he had that good of a draft.
I don't like it.
I think he drafted a quarterback who got injured 6 weeks into the season last year because he's a running quarterback.
He's got Anthony Richardson, Jamar Chase, Deebo Samuel, Kyron Williams,
who's a punt returner,
Jalen Waddle, and he got TJ Hawkinson, a pick that I just made me so mad that I didn't think about doing it myself. I ended up doing it in another league later that night. He took TJ Hawkinson so we can put him on the IR spot and he can pick up another player. It's basically a free selection for him.
I did that with Nick Chubb. I didn't think T-Bone had that good of a draft, man.
I think he's going to win the league. I think he's going to win the league again.
I actually thought Grant had a great draft. Last year he had one, but then like every single player on Grant's team fell apart.
Yeah, my team is still named the injured reserve. So.
Yeah.
Oh, the opening drive was mad because I left out Danny Mac. Danny Mac told us in the past he didn't want to play.
Dan said he didn't want to play, man.
Dan said he didn't want to play.
Hey, man, BK's been walking around the office demanding money from everybody for the last 2 months. If you wanted to be a part of the league, all you needed to do was speak up.
Frick James saying BK taking cash considerations under the table.
Oh, yeah. I'm more than happy to.
He was individually texting everybody, be like, hey, man, you want the first overall pick? Hey, man, you want the first overall pick? I'll give you your money back. You want the first overall pick? I didn't think T-Bone had that good of a draft, man. I'm not worried about T-Bone this year.
I think T-Bone's screwed because BK just endorsed him, so the BKO is... I think this is your attempt at knocking him off the top.
Yeah, that's very true.
I'm playing Bury the Bodies this week. I'm playing Stolter.
I'm playing Rockio.
You're going to win that one.
I know. I actually liked mine one, but the problem, what's so poetic about this is everyone remembers how much I hated Jahmyr Gibbs last year because Dan Campbell never used him. We got to the second round last night, and Jahmyr Gibbs was sitting there, and I'm like, well, I guess I got to take this guy again, don't I?
Yeah, I did not.
But then I scored Nick Chubb on my bench.
That a lot of my fantasy team went. I do have Christian McCaffrey, so whatever.
I took BK's guy, Jordan Love, so if that guy sucks, I'm going to have
I think he'll be good. I got Kyler Murray. I'm happy about that. I think it's way more enjoyable to play fantasy football when you like the quarterback that you have.
Yeah, well, somebody took C.J. Stroud right before me, and I was so pissed.
Well, you had payback on me later because I really wanted Tank Dell. And you took him like 2 spots before I
had to
picked.
Get somebody from the Texans. Diggs went, Nico Collins went, C.J. Stroud went. I almost got Dalton Schultz, and then somebody was auto-drafting, and they got rewarded a pick.
Carey. Was auto-drafting, I think, a couple of times.
Screwed
and
me
it
off
really
of a
ticks
pick.
me off when somebody gets rewarded for an auto pick.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
We do that in our league, and I know we're not in person with ours. We do it online. We do it in person, and if you don't show up, we kick you out. Like, that's just how it goes. And the problem was we had nobody to fill that spot this year, and we didn't want to go to an odd number. So the dude that wasn't there got auto pick. He screwed 4 different people over on a pick 4 separate times.
I believe it.
And we texted him afterwards and said, "You're done. You're not back."
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll keep you apprised with everything that goes on with the Fantasy Football League throughout the season this year. Coming up at the end of the 1 o'clock hour, we're going to give you a chance to score a 4-pack of tickets to next Tuesday night's Budweiser Bash. By the way, you can join Randy Kerber, who is a part of our Fantasy League, on September 9th from 4 to 6 o'clock at Fenton Bar and Grill. Come out, see the best servers in town, best bartenders in town, enjoy some great food as well. They've got those best original trashed wings in St. Louis. Plus, you can get signed up for 101 ESPN giveaways. It's Randy Kerber at Fenton Bar and Grill Monday night, 4 o'clock until 6 p.m. More details at 101ESPN.com. Coming up next, is it possible for Mizzou to actually be better defensively this year than they were a year ago? We'll talk about it here on 101 ESPN. So I'm not expecting Jake Neighbours to score 30-plus goals this year, and I'm not expecting, Alex, Missouri's defense to be better than they were last year. It's a high bar to clear.
Positive.
Missouri last year was a top 25 defense in the country, and it's hard to just assume, okay, yeah, they're going to be better than that going into 2024. But I think there's a chance. With Alex Ferrario and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. You get BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Coming up in about 10 minutes or so, we'll get into more likely to happen. If you guys have any scenarios, two scenarios rather, we'll tell you which one is more likely in a game we call more likely to happen here on 101 ESPN. So Alex, on Thursday night last week, you guys talked about this on Friday, I would assume. Missouri beat the ever-living hell out of Murray State. They finished the game winning 51-0, and they left that game having allowed the fewest total yards and the fewest first downs in any individual Missouri game since 2011. So in the last 13 years, they haven't had that kind of a beatdown defensively against anybody, regardless of level of opponent, since 2011. That is noteworthy. And as I was watching that game and you see the number of players that are cycling through, man, they go like 6 deep at defensive tackle. They have 4 linebackers they really trust, 4 corners they trust, 6 safeties that they trust right now. They are deeper on that side of the ball right now than they were at this point last year. I don't know if they're going to be better in terms of the top-level talent. I would doubt it. I don't think they have anybody that's like a Darius Robinson on the defensive side of the ball this year. But they're deeper, and I do wonder if they can become a more sound overall unit. Last year was very much a, we're going to blitz like crazy, and if you get an explosive play against us, so be it. We're going to try to create as many sacks and as many tackles for loss as possible because those end drives. And even if that means giving up some more explosive plays where you're going over the top, and Mizzou ended up allowing a top 25 rate of explosive pass plays allowed, we'll live with that because we think that the payoff is worth it with the tackles for loss and sacks. Maybe this year, there are fewer tackles for loss, fewer sacks, but more overall stops defensively. Do you think that is in their range of outcomes, Alex?
I do. In fact, after watching that game on Thursday, and again, I know it's Murray State, I was more impressed by their secondary defense. I mean, they were able to break up plays. They picked up a couple of interceptions, one of them that basically was turned back into a touchdown. I was more impressed by the secondary and how they were able to perform against Murray State. And I think they gave up, 27 passing yards in that game in total? Like, they beat the hell out of them. So the depth part, I think, is the most important because in years past, and talking with you about this, it has always felt like Mizzou is worn down by the time you get to SEC play because you have guys that get injured in the first couple of weeks. You've got guys that just kind of are exposed a little bit.
It's a long season, man.
Yeah.
NFL or college football is physically taxed.
And if Mizzou has the ability to do what they did against Murray State in these first few games, and look, it's not going to be as much of a cakewalk when you take on Buffalo and you take on, who's the next one? Is it Boston College? Mm-hmm. Those are obviously going to be a little bit more difficult, but if you have the luxury of getting a large enough lead and you have that depth to where you could give a breather a couple of times to your top performers on defense, that benefits you so much when you get to the SEC play. And I mean, depth in any sport is always a benefit, but it feels more so in the SEC before you get into that conference play. When you know your guys are at least fresh enough for you, that's what sets you over the top. That's how teams like Alabama and Georgia, because their depth is so damn good.
Look at those teams and look at what they do in terms of the rotation for their defensive linemen. They'll go 8, 9, 10 deep along the defensive line, and they'll just rotate them throughout the course of the game. So that way they've got new, fresh energy bodies that are going to be coming into the game at any given time going up against the same offensive linemen that are playing every single snap. And so you just rotate through those guys to try to get the best snaps possible. I think that's something that Missouri is more capable of doing this year than they were a year ago. At linebacker, I think they have guys that can play different styles of games. So if you're playing against more of a physically imposing team, you could have these two guys that are out there more of the time. If you are going up against a team that's very much like a spread them out, we need speed all over the place, it's a different set of linebackers that are potentially going to be out there. So I think they're well suited for a bunch of different styles of games, and it could make them a more well-rounded defense, even if they're not necessarily as fun to watch as the defense was a year ago. I do want to talk briefly about Illinois, because T-Bone sent this to us yesterday, Alex. Illinois has officially sold out the game for this weekend against the University of Kansas, which is good. This is a huge game, and it has the opportunity to send them in the right trajectory. This is the first football sellout for the University of Illinois since 2016. It's a big deal, man. Selling out the stadium for the first time in 8 years is not something that should be completely overlooked. You're going up against a top 20 opponent. If you remember a couple of years ago, that 2022 team, that was a really good football team. But early on, they kind of threw us off the scent of it being a good team because they lost to Indiana on the road in week 2 on that weird Friday night game where they lost Connor Bazelak and the Indiana Hoosiers. This has the opportunity for Illinois to be what the Kansas State game was for Mizzou last year. Now, that game was on the road, if I remember correctly. Yeah. But this game will be at home for Illinois. And if you beat a top 20 opponent, dude, Illinois fans are going to be all in on this team suddenly. And you can't really take much out of the game against Eastern Illinois, but a game against Kansas will tell you a lot. KU's a really good football team, and they've got a great quarterback. So I'm legitimately excited to watch this one on Saturday. And now that we know it's going to be a great atmosphere for Illinois as well, there's a lot riding on the line in terms of the upside of this season if you're Illinois.
Yeah, and I think the excitement of why this game is for how good Luke Altmaier looked in that first week. I mean, I didn't think Illinois had any offense this season. I thought it was going to be a boring Illinois season of defense and special teams, but it's going to be tight. And then you go out there and you see Luke Altmaier have a lot of success in that week. And then the wide receiver, who was it that made that Pat Bryant, the one that made that insane catch in the end zone. They actually have some playmakers, and this does have the makings of one hell to start a season for Illinois, because if you find some way to beat a top 20 team in Kansas and start the season off 2-0, we were talking about this, Nebraska, Penn State, those are going to be difficult games for Illinois, including that you're on the road for both of them. But, man, if you start the season off 3-0 after Central Michigan and you find a way to win one, maybe two of those games, nobody expected Illinois to be doing that this early on, and it all comes from Kansas.
Yeah, the KU game is the flip game. That's the swing game that can potentially elevate you from maybe 6-6, maybe 7-5 in a good outcome scenario too. Okay, maybe there's an 8-4 range of outcomes here. Yeah. Maybe 9-3, depending on what happens against a Nebraska or Michigan, Oregon, and those really difficult games on your schedule. Could you maybe flip one of them in your favor? And now we're talking about a genuinely special season for the University of Illinois. It all starts on Saturday with this game against Kansas. Mizzou's season really doesn't start until next week. They have a game technically on Saturday. We won't learn a lot about them once again. But Illinois, we potentially can. So that's a game that I'm going to have circled on my schedule for sure. Coming up in 15 minutes, we're talking to Chris Kerber. He's the voice of the Blues. But next, it's time for a game of more likely to happen. You give us 2 scenarios. We'll tell you which one is more likely here on BK and Ferrario. Hey, it's BK, and it is time to unlock your inner champion today. The place to do so is Victory Men's Health. They have 4 great locations across the St. Louis area. And men, for you out there, if you're looking for weight loss goals that you haven't been able to meet on your own, you've got low testosterone issues, erectile dysfunction, they could potentially help you out over at Victory Men's Health. Check them out today. VictoryMen'sHealth.com is the place where you can go to find them. They can unlock your inner champion. For me, that meant going in there, getting my micronutrient lab tested, and they came back and they said, hey, here's where you're at with all of your different levels. Here's where you're at on your testosterone. Here's where you're at with all of your micronutrients, and found out I had some micronutrient deficiencies. And they helped me out with that with some supplements. And in doing so, now I feel like I have more energy throughout the day. I feel like I'm getting through things a little easier. I'm getting more out of my workouts as well. Whether it's micronutrient deficiency, weight loss goals, low testosterone, erectile dysfunction, they can help you out at Victory Men's Health. They are there to unlock your inner champion. So check them out today, Victory Men's Health and VictoryMen'sHealth.com.
more likely to happen? They'll figure it out. BK and Ferrario's most likely to happen.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. You give us two scenarios. We will tell you which one is more likely here on BK and Ferrario. Alex, I'm going to take your two teams that you love and ask you to be negative about them.
Oh, okay.
More likely to miss the playoffs this year, the Texans or the Lions?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'll say the Lions. Or I'm sorry. I'll say the Texans because the AFC feels like at least it has more teams. Like the AFC or the NFC feels like the NFC feels like you've got a real shot because like you're squinting to find those last two teams that get in. I think the AFC is a little bit more difficult to view. And as much as I love CJ Stroud, and don't get me wrong, I love this dude. There is a potential of that dude has a step back. Stephon Diggs might actually be a real problem. And defensively, you might have a little bit of a setback there. Like, I look at the AFC and Bills, Dolphins, Jets. You've got the Chiefs. I don't know what the Chargers are going to be. You've got the Ravens and the Bengals. Steelers are always there. And if you're the Texans, you do have to worry about the Colts and the Titans this year. So I'll say the Texans.
I'm going to switch this one up on you a little bit, BK, because I think you'll like this. More likely to jump that one of those teams. The Colts jumping the Texans or the Packers jumping the Lions?
Packers.
Dude,
I think the Packers.
Better after I drafted Jordan Love.
I think the Packers are going to be really good, like a Super Bowl contender this year.
I'm not buying any stock in the Colts, so I'm with BK on that one. I don't think Anthony Richardson is going to be able to stay healthy for them all season, for the style he plays. You've already gotten a pretty serious injury for a guy like this last year as a rookie. That means it's a little bit more fragile. I don't know if you can withstand that. So I would say the Packers, too.
So here's the reason why I'm going to say more likely to miss is the Texans. One, defense, as you mentioned, Alex. But two, just the schedule. Like, think about the quarterbacks that they are potentially going to have to beat this year to just be like an 11-6 type of a team, all right? Trevor Lawrence.
No, that'll be easy.
Josh Allen, Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers, Jared Goff, and the Lions. They do play against each other head-to-head on November 10th.
I'm gonna be like a torn mother on that game. I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Dak Prescott on the road, Monday Night Football in Dallas.
That'll be easy.
Tua.
That'll be easy.
Patrick Mahomes on the road in Kansas City, and then Lamar Jackson. That's 9 of their games where they're either going up against an elite-level quarterback or a potentially elite-level offense that has a good quarterback like Tua, like Dak, like Jared Goff, for example. So I don't know, man. And did I mention Caleb Williams, who they have to play as well? Like that's a lot of really good quarterbacks, and I did not bring up Anthony Richardson, who has the potential to be that too. If you don't have a great defense and you're going up against those quarterbacks over the course of the season, go back and look at the quarterbacks that they beat last year. It is not an impressive list. We are expecting a lot from a team like Houston to just immediately go from good to great and a Super Bowl contender by year 2. Yeah. I think they're a good team. I do think they will end up making the playoffs. But if they don't, we'll look back and say, man, we should have seen some of the signs based on their schedule and based on the fact that they do have some legitimate question marks still on the defensive side of the ball.
Guys, more likely to happen, Pavel Buchnevich or Jordan Kyrou scores 40 goals this year?
I'm still going to say Jordan Kyrou, man.
I would say Kyrou as well. I wouldn't put money on it, but I think Jordan Kyrou has more of the upside of goal scoring and less of the assist, where Buch is sort of the opposite. Like, I think Buch is a little bit more evenly distributed when it comes to goals and assists, and I think Kyrou would be heavier on the goal side.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that lane too. I think Buchnevich has the best shot to give Robert Thomas a 100-point season.
Yes.
But I think Jordan Kyrou is the better shot to be a 40-goal scorer.
I agree with that.
I just don't want Buch to play. If Buch plays center, none of those two things happen.
Do you have anything for us today, Grant?
Yeah, I was actually going to do something a little bit similar, Alex. New Blues edition, forwards.
All right.
Dylan Holloway or Alexander Texier score 20 goals this season. More likely to happen. And this is their past a little bit. Holloway this past season only had 6 goals, but it was in 38 games played. Texier had 12 goals in 78 games.
I do think people are sleeping on Texier a little bit.
I told you about this yesterday, and credit to Mike Meyer, who he's kind of he works for, I think it's he used to work for the Hockey News. Now he's kind of a independent contractor, but he's been posting a lot of stuff about the play-in games that are taking place for a lot of these European teams for the Olympics next year. Alex Texier has been the best player for the France team. Now, I understand it's a France team, so what do you really expect? But in 2 games, he scored 5 points, 3 goals, and 2 assists. I think this guy's got offensive potential that you don't know of because he's been on the bottom line in Columbus for his entire career.
What's interesting, and I was looking at this on his hockey reference page, Texier 2 seasons ago, well, it was the 2021-22 season, only played 36 games, but he had 11 goals. Yeah. It's like a 25-ish pace.
I still would say Holloway because I don't think Texier's playing in your top 9.
I think I agree with you.
Because of Saad, and I think Matthew Joseph is going to be more of a top 9 than Texier. I think he's got an opportunity to get that if an injury takes place or if a guy underperforms.
I think it depends on Bolduc.
I don't think Bolduc's on this team no matter what. I think a little of it could depend on
I think that could open up a spot for Texier then. Texier or Joseph, one of those two. I think one of those two will probably end up on your third line in that scenario.
Yeah.
Unless I guess then it comes down to Dvorsky as well.
Yeah, I was going to say because
Dvorsky and Bolduc really change a lot for the outlook of guys like Joseph and Texier.
Yeah, because in my opinion, Holloway's on your second line next year and Saad starts on your third line. And then from there, you're talking Kyrie or Neighbours on a second line in one spot to fill. The one thing with Texier is he's small, but he plays feisty.
He's not that small. He's like 6'1", $195.
Oh, is he really?
Yeah.
Man, I thought he was smaller than that.
His nickname is Big Tex.
It's nothing like Big D, though.
No.
Man, if you have Big Tex and Big D on one line, oh, man, it's always bigger in Tex.
It's going to be a hell of a game in Dallas.
Oh, my God. Curbs is going to love these nicknames that I have for this Tex. Big D line. It's always bigger in Texas. Man. The puns that I am going to have on pre and post this season. Woo, buddy.
I'm already dreading.
You're a big D guy, aren't you? Come on. You got to be.
You know I'm a little big guy. All right.
Come on, man.
From the 314, guys, more likely to happen. Josh Allen wins MVP or Luther Burden wins the Heisman. I would go Josh
Allen.
It's just so hard for a wide receiver to win the Heisman.
I mean, it's not a good. That Murray State game was supposed to be your starting resume for it. You needed like 3 touchdowns, and you only got 1 in it. So, yeah, Allen.
More likely to happen, Goldie's on the Cardinals roster in 2025 or Carpenter's on the Cardinals coaching staff in 2025?
Carpenter's on the coaching staff. Carpenter's already a hitting coach.
Carpenter's going to be back on the roster, probably.
Surprised me. I mean, he's already basically been credited for Alec Burleson. Who was the other guy that basically said Carpenter changed my swing? There was another one that said it, but yeah, Carpenter's already the assistant hitting coach. Plan for him to be that next year.
I think Goldie. I still think they're going to try to bring Goldie back until proven otherwise. All right, final thing here. More likely to pull the upset this weekend.
Today, Junior.
Arkansas versus Oklahoma State or Illinois versus Kansas. Arkansas or Illinois, which one is more likely to pull off the upset this weekend? I'm going to say Arkansas against Oklahoma State. Don't hate me, Illinois fans. Huh?
Is that one in Arkansas?
I'd have to check. I believe it's in Oklahoma State. But that one is it. Yeah, it's in Stillwater. I think Arkansas is more likely. You guys have heard me all offseason. I think that Kansas is a sleeper contender to make it to the college football playoff. I just think they're a really good team that gets slept on, and they're not ranked as highly as they probably should be because it's Kansas. So I think they're the team for me that I would put.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do Illinois just because it's a home game against a top-ranked team. You're coming off a really good offensive performance. I'm going to go Illinois.
I think I'd go Arkansas here, too. Oklahoma State's always one of those teams that has a letdown game, and that feels like it could be one of them.
There you go. That is Grant Francis. He's Alex Ferrario. I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, we're going to have a conversation with our friend and the voice of the Blues. He's Chris Kerber here on 101 ESPN.
If you think that you're going to needing a new air conditioner for the rest of the summer, maybe you're not thinking that the furnace is going to get you through the winter. Now is the time to actually get online or call Classic Air Care. New government regulations are going to be kicking in January, which is going to increase the prices of a lot of units by 10 and even 15%. And you want to get ahead of it. So if you think that there's one in your near future, go ahead and get it booked now. You can get an instant HVAC system quote on their website, and they're accurate. Go to classicaircare.com. It's the big blue button right at the top. Right above that, you can read one of the thousands of reviews that they have to get a 4.8 Google rating, and maybe even just keep your life simple as well. Buy your air filters through them. And then again, another simple button right on the front page of their website. They make things easy for you. So whether it's about saving you money, repairing the unit for your house, keeping your house comfortable, educating you on what you need, their membership for repairs and their memberships for service are all affordable and there to make your life easy. That is why Classic Air Care has been making people comfortable since 1926. Again, go online and book an appointment today, classicaircare.com.
Greg Francis here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals found a way last night as they won 7-4 in extra innings. Took 12 innings, but they got the win. Steven Matz, in his return from the IL, went 4 2/3 innings, had 3 hits against him, 3 earned runs, and had 7 strikeouts in the outing. Today it'll be sunny gray for the Cardinals in the series ender for the Cardinals going up against the Brewers. They're looking to win this series tonight in Milwaukee. Sonny Gray going up against Colin Ray for the Brewers. First pitch will be at 6:40. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports Center update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Hey, coming up in the next segment, we're going to give you a chance to score a 4-pack of tickets to next Tuesday night's Budweiser Bash game for the Cardinals versus the Reds. So stay tuned for that. But right now, we're going out to the 101 ESPN hotline to be joined by Chris Kerber. He's the voice of the Blues. He's joining us here on BK and Ferrario. Curbs, appreciate the time as always, my man. Let's bring you in on the conversation that we had earlier today about Jake Neighbours and what we should be expecting out of him heading into 2024. Because I work with a man in Alex Ferrario who, you know, Curbs, can get out a little bit over his skis sometimes when it comes to expectations for young players, and it's just always going to be they take a next step. I feel like 20 to 25 goals is a fair expectation for him going into this season. Where would you set that expectation for Jake Neighbours heading into 2024?
I would be perfectly happy with that range. I think it's fair to expect in that 25 to 30 range. When you look at the fact that in his career, even starting with just playing the 9 games that he played in his first year, he was averaging just about 10 minutes a game. It went up a couple minutes in year 2. Well, last year, it went up to about 15 and a half minutes a game. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't expect that 15 and a half minutes a game I don't know why you wouldn't expect that to become closer to 18 minutes, almost 3 more minutes a game this year. So with that extra ice time and again, an improved power play, a more consistent power play throughout the whole schedule rather than just part of it, I could see, Jake Neighbours having continued success. Now, I think you bring up a great point, BK, because sometimes the next year doesn't always necessarily have to mean a better year numbers-wise to show growth. And you're talking about a guy who now is without a doubt going to be circled on the board. They're going to be keying on him. They're going to be much more aware of him. And so Jake is going to have to continue to work through those scenarios as veteran D-men and teams start to really game plan for him. That said, I think he's got the mind and the ability and the approach to do it. So you're talking about a player that had 38 points last year. I think anything over 40 points and 25 goals this year for Jake Neighbours is another great year.
So, Kerbs, I know in the past, and this just might be a main thing with head coaches in the NHL of how they like to formulate their line combinations, where you have your playmaker, you have your goal scorer, and then typically you have that forechecker who can retrieve pucks for the teams. Do you believe that Drew Bannister is going to continue down that route, or do you think it's going to emphasize maybe a little bit more of speed with the line combinations, depending on who they have out there?
Here's the one thing I know about coaches and line combinations, and this is where it's changed a lot, say, in the last 10 years, maybe even a little bit longer than that. Line combinations used to be a combination of 3 guys, right? Well, what coaches have really started doing was they started really focusing on pairs. So it'd be a center and a winger in all likelihood, whether it be a left winger or a right winger. And then what you find is when they want to juggle the lines up, I mean, it's not a complete bingo game in a hat. It's only one guy on a line changing one thing. They're not eager to change, entire lines in terms of that unless things are really wrong. The reason I say that is the way that Doug Armstrong has built this team for camp, the types of players that they brought in. I think they brought in the kind of players that they brought in for 2 specific reasons. Size is one, speed is the other. And what Drew Bannister has now been given is the option for size and speed on all of his lines. So I don't know that he'll be looking at things as, well, I want this to be more of a speed line, this to be more of a size line, that kind of thing. I actually think he has the options to put that on every one of his lines. I do think from maybe a one-step back picture, Alex, I do think that what you're going to see is a much more – I think you're going to see more of that get the puck in deep, kind of grind it away style that we saw with Ken Hitchcock. I would expect to see a little bit more of that than what's what I'm looking for, than the rush game, right? The Blues analytics, they know. I mean, Drew Bannister referenced this. He referenced this many times. He goes, if you look at Vancouver 2 years ago, they were one of the leading rush attack teams in the National Hockey League. And now if you look at them last year, a year they had great success, they became an offensive zone puck possession team, and I got to think that that's what this team is leaning towards.
We're talking to Chris Kerber. He's the voice of the Blues. He's joining us here on 101 ESPN. Kerbs, on the other side of things, it's not necessarily a positive story to have to discuss, but Torey Krug made himself available earlier today, and Alex was down there to talk with him about what the surgery is going to entail, what his future holds. It was a pretty somber conversation, as you probably would expect, and he got emotional about midway through as he was talking about not only what this surgery is going to mean for him in terms of his hockey career, but also his personal life. It's been really hard for him to deal with this. I am curious, first on the hockey side of things, Kerbs, for what this means for the Blues. I don't know how much you have heard of his interview from earlier today or if you were able to get down there to see it, but did you get a sense from listening to Krug on how serious this is going to be, not just for the 2024 season, which he's going to miss out on entirely, but also for, he's got a 3-year deal left here in St. Louis. Were you able to read between the lines at all in terms of how he expects this to affect his playing career?
Well, I think you saw in the emotion that he showed, you saw some of the pain of just not understanding is not the right word, of coming to terms with not playing this year. He kept referencing the fact that, 13 years right after Labor Day, he's used to coming into town and getting on the ice with his teammates and going after that. And you look at it, for the most part, with over 60 games played in just about every year, you're looking at a fairly durable man who was an undrafted. Listen, I'm a Torey Krug fan, not just of the hockey player, but of the person, of the personality, of the quality of the individual. An undrafted college player that joined the Boston Bruins and finished fourth in Calder voting for Rookie of the Year, that is now like 43rd all time in terms of points per game from a defenseman. It's been a heck of a career. I don't think, and he mentioned this, BK, he said he wasn't, it's been hard for him to even kind of comprehend. He hasn't put a ton of thought on really what this means long term. Because when you're talking about a surgery that, as he referenced, is one that you'd expect to maybe get when he was in his 50s, to get it at 33, I just don't know that he knows himself. And so I think the emotion you saw today, some of that somberness you're referring to, is that unknown of, am I having a press conference really not knowing if I played my last game in the National Hockey League? Knowing athletes like you guys do and like I do, unless they know for sure, there's no way they're giving up the boat. So Torey Krug's going to have the surgery. They're going to go at it. They're going to get more information, but he's going to go into this saying, yeah, this is a year, but I'm going to fight to play my last 2 years of that contract. And that's going to be the approach. What the future is, I don't know enough about the surgery to know what the chances and all that stuff are, but it's just not going to be in his DNA and attitude to look at it that way. So, yeah, realistically, there is a chance he's played his last game in the National Hockey League, at least at the level he thought he could play at. But is that reality? I have no idea. So it's still you guys could imagine. I mean, we just saw the Olympics, right? Like, just imagine somebody that's been training for the Olympics for 4 years, all that work you're doing on your own when there's no cameras, anything around, and in the qualifying rounds or tournaments or races, you pull a muscle and you don't get to go to the Olympics, or you trip and fall. Dan Jansen in the Winter Olympics years ago. I just dated myself over every one of you guys. I just realized that.
Did you say Cam Jansen?
It truly is. No, I said Dan Jansen. It's a terrific. It's an amazing Olympic story, actually. So, yeah. And then for somebody to sit there and try to have to put it in words when you're getting asked questions, it's not easy. But I thought he handled it well. I thought somber is a fair way to mention it, BK. And I'm pulling for Torey Krug to make his way back and play some more in the National Hockey League. It's a better National Hockey League with him in it.
No doubt. And I think Blues fans, we played some of the audio earlier today. I think Blues fans got to know him as a person a little bit better through that as well. Obviously, you would prefer not to have to, given the circumstances. But I think from that perspective, especially given how things have gone on the ice at times and how that has influenced the way that people think about specific players, I think it was good for them to be able to understand the person a little bit more.
Yeah, sorry, BK. So didn't mean to jump in on you there.
No, you're good.
The others, well, look, I'm going to miss him wearing the Louis hat. Okay, so I hope I still see that happen. That made me, honestly, he'd do an interview wearing the hat with Louis on the front, and it just made me laugh every single time. But, he played 77 games last year. And I know as fans, and we do it, we're on this guy for playing this way, that, for that way, that kind of stuff. He was playing with an injury that was a chronic situation that he was trying to get through, and he's been doing it now for a number of years, to the point that he could not train this summer and continue his career without this surgery. It puts a little perspective, and this is why I'm always careful, with the quote-unquote critique of a player, because injuries, I mean, these guys tried to play through a lot. He played 77 games through some pretty amazing pain last year. And at times it wasn't good. At times it was really good. And I think Torey Krug had a terrific year. He's just a competitor. Thought he was just fine last year. So it just shows you what some of these athletes are going through, no matter the sport, just what it takes to get out on the field sometimes. And, not everybody gets to write their John Elway ending. Sometimes it comes to an end sooner than you wanted to. In this case, let's hope he's able to get better and find a way back.
Curves, appreciate the time as always, my man. We'll talk with you again next week.
All right, fellas, have an awesome rest of your week.
Same to you. That's Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues, joining us as he does each and every Wednesday here on BK and Ferrario. Hey, you can join all of us for the second annual Blues and Brews on Friday evening, September the 20th at the Anheuser-Busch Brewery. Get fired up for the Blues season. There will be live music. There will be guest appearances from Blues players and alumni, food trucks, giveaways, so much more. Tickets just $20 on sale right now over at 101ESPN.com. To open up the next segment, we're going to give you a chance to score a 4-pack of tickets to next Tuesday night's Budweiser Bash. That's next in the BK and Ferrario Rewind here on 101 ESPN. Hey, right now is your chance to win a 4-pack of tickets to next Tuesday night's Budweiser Bash game for the Cardinals versus the Reds. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Texter number 101 with the correct answer to the following question is getting that 4-pack of tickets to next Tuesday night's Budweiser Bash game. The question is, who is the team, who's the player, the fantasy manager, that we're kicking out of the fantasy league next year? We mentioned this during the junk drawer. If you have the correct answer to that question, the fantasy manager from 101 ESPN that we're kicking out of the league next year, if you have the correct answer, your texter number 101, you're getting that 4-pack of tickets. Thanks to Budweiser for hooking us up with the Bud Bash giveaway all season long. If you guys missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. The free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Alex, before we get out of here today, the Cardinals back in action this evening against the Milwaukee Brewers. Sonny Gray on the mound. This should be a win day. We'll see, though. The Cardinals, if they win this, will have split or won in 5 consecutive series against a playoff contender. They will have gone, again, if they win tonight, 11-8 against the Dodgers, Brewers, Minnesota Twins, the San Diego Padres, and the Yankees. This was the stretch of games that we thought would ultimately kind of sneak up on them and knock them out of contention. It wasn't. It was the series against the Reds, the Cubs, and the Pirates that ultimately did them in. You think they get it done tonight? I said they wouldn't last night, so obviously I was off there. But
I don't think so, mostly because this has just been the Cardinals. You win one, you lose one, you win one, you lose one. If they do, I mean, credit to them. You have found ways to do it. Again, this is the Blues of last year. This is awesome that you're doing this against Milwaukee and the Yankees and all these tough teams. Like the Blues, it was awesome that you found ways to keep beating the Edmonton Oilers. But when you lose to the San Jose Sharks, when you lose to the Cincinnati Reds and the Chicago Cubs, it's hard for me to get excited about what you're doing right now. Look, some of these young guys are having a massive impact, and you do see what the future could potentially be. But then on the flip side of it, it was Steven Matz that pitched well yesterday. Am I going to buy stock into that? Absolutely not. Not after last year. Am I going to buy stock into seeing some of these offensive hitters like Paul Goldschmidt tear it up since July 1st? No, because it's what hurt the Cardinals this season and put them in this position. So it's just so hard to go back and forth with what they're doing now.
Yeah, I'm saying they don't get it done tonight. I think this is one of those Sonny Gray starts where we look back, we're like, God, another home run that he gave up. 5 innings, 4 earned runs, 2 on homers,
9 strikeouts.
Cardinals lose 5-2, feels about right. And then you go into the off day tomorrow, reassess, and you go into that series against Seattle, and we're all kind of thinking the same thing that we are right now, which is, they're a fine team, not going to make the playoffs. We'll move on with our lives. For Alex Ferrario and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. Made it almost the entire show without a Grant. Did a great job filling in for T-Bone today. T-Bone back in with us tomorrow. We will talk to you guys then tomorrow at 11 a.m. Fastlane coming up next here on 101 ESPN.